Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories. Chapter 1: Blood on the Snow. The military parade square of Arventhor smelled like iron in winter. Alara Voss stood at the edge of the square, one gauntleted hand wrapped around the reins of her black warhorse, the other pressed flat against her own thigh to stop the trembling. The trembling was not fear. It was the aftermath of killing 7 men in the border ambush 3 hours ago, the last of whom had driven a serrated blade across her left wrist before she'd taken his throat with her sword pommel. The wound had been wrapped in a torn strip of her own cloak. The blood had frozen into the fabric. She could feel it cracking every time she moved her fingers. Behind her, Noctis, her warhorse, her oldest companion, the meanest animal in the royal stables, snorted and stamped one massive hoof into the snow. He did this whenever he was bored, annoyed, or plotting to bite someone. At present, she suspected all three. "Easy," she murmured. Noctis flattened his ears and tossed his head sideways, yanking the reins hard enough to jolt her injured wrist. She hissed through her teeth. He had the temperament of a drunken tavern brawler and the intelligence of a war strategist, and he had never once in his life been easy about anything. She'd found him 6 years ago in a burned-out border stable, a half-starved yearling with hooves too big for his legs and fury in every line of his body. The stable master had warned her not to go near him. "He bites," the man had said. "He kicks. He'll kill you if you try to saddle him." Alara had walked in anyway, because she'd recognized something in those wild black eyes. She had been 15. She'd had no wolf form, no noble bloodline, no mother, and a father who drank himself to sleep every night in a guardsman's barracks. She understood what it meant to be angry and have no one to explain it to. She'd sat in the corner of his stall for 3 hours. She hadn't touched him. She'd simply sat there eating an apple, and when she was done, she'd placed the core on the ground and left. The next morning, the core was gone. The morning after that, she brought 2 apples. By the 4th day, he'd come close enough to breathe on her hair. By the 7th, he'd let her touch his nose. He'd bitten her on the 8th day, hard enough to leave a scar on her shoulder, and she'd bitten him back. Not literally, but she'd flicked his ear so hard he'd startled backward into the wall. They had understood each other perfectly ever since. Now Noctis shoved his massive head against her back, pushing her forward half a step. He wanted to leave. He had wanted to leave since they'd arrived. Horses were not stupid creatures, whatever the nobles said, and Noctis in particular possessed an uncanny ability to sense when a situation was about to become terrible. But she could not leave, not yet. Ahead of her, the parade square was arranged in the rigid formations of a royal acknowledgement ceremony. The Council of Elders occupied the raised stone dais at the center, 7 ancient werewolves in silver-trimmed black robes, their faces carved into permanent expressions of disapproval. Flanking them were the noble houses, arranged by rank. Fur-lined cloaks, jeweled circlets, gloved hands clasped over embroidered sashes. To the left, the soldiers of the Crown Guard stood in polished rows, breath steaming in the cold. To the right, the court ladies and lesser nobles clustered together like a flock of brightly plumed birds. And in the center of it all, standing on the frost-covered stone with his back to her, was Aldrich. Crown Prince Aldrich Veyron, her fated mate. Even now, even with blood frozen to her wrist and 7 kills sitting heavy in her bones, the sight of him made something twist beneath her ribs. Not the mate bond, though that was there too, that low golden hum that had lived inside her chest since she was 17 and first felt it snap into place. This was older than the bond. This was memory. This was the boy who had pulled her out of a frozen river when she was 12, who had taught her the sword forms the weapons master wouldn't teach girls, who had sat beside her on a parapet at dawn and said, "You don't need a wolf, Alara. You already fight like one." She had loved him since before she knew what the word meant. Aldrich turned. Even across the width of the parade square, she could see how the cold had sharpened his features. The strong jaw, the dark brow, the mouth that was too severe for softness but had once smiled at her like she was the only warmth in the kingdom. His black hair was pushed back from his face, and his golden eyes, wolf eyes always, found her immediately. Something flickered there, pain maybe, or guilt. Noctis snorted again, louder this time, and Alara felt the reins go taut as he shifted his weight. He never liked Aldrich. Even in the early days when she and Aldrich had been inseparable, the horse had regarded the crown prince with the particular disdain of an animal who could smell dishonesty long before it arrived. "Stand," she told him quietly. He stomped, twice. She ignored him because Lady Cordelia Ashworth was stepping forward. Cordelia was beautiful. That had never been in dispute. She had auburn hair that fell in perfect waves, a waist like a drawn bowstring, skin that had never been within spitting distance of a battlefield, and a laugh that sounded like crystal chimes designed specifically to make other women feel inadequate. She was the daughter of Lord Ashworth, the wealthiest nobleman in Arventhor, and she had been presented to the council as a suitable Luna candidate 6 months ago. Around the same time, the whispers about Alara's lack of wolf form had grown too loud to ignore. Cordelia placed her hand on Aldrich's arm. It was a small gesture, delicate, possessive, perfectly calculated. Alara saw it. The entire square saw it. That was, of course, the point. Aldrich did not remove the hand. And then he spoke. "Lady Cordelia has stood faithfully beside the crown during the recent border conflicts," he said, his voice carrying across the parade ground with the practiced ease of a man raised to address armies. "Her devotion to the council's guidance and the traditions of our bloodline is beyond reproach." Beside Alara, Noctis made a sound that could only be described as derisive. She agreed with him, but she kept her face still. She had spent 10 years in this court. She knew how to hold her expression. She knew how to stand with blood soaking through her glove and not let a single person see her flinch. Elder Hargrave, the eldest and most venomous member of the council, leaned forward on the dais. "And what of the knight, Your Highness?" Aldrich's jaw tightened. She saw it, the microflexion, the way his eyes darted toward her and then deliberately pulled away. "The knight?" "Sir Alara Voss." Hargrave's voice was thin and precise, like a needle threading through silk. "Your personal guard. The soldiers report she single-handedly broke the ambush at the Thornwinter Pass this morning. 7 enemy wolves, was it? While the rest of your escort was pinned down?" Silence in the square. The soldiers shifted. Some of them had been there. Some of them had watched her walk into that ambush with nothing but a sword and a warhorse while they cowered behind overturned carts. "She performed her duty," Aldrich said. "Her duty." Alara's fingers tightened on the reins. "Indeed." Hargrave smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had already arranged the outcome of this conversation. "And what is her duty, precisely?" "I ask because there has been some confusion among the court about the nature of her position." Cordelia lifted her chin. The torchlight caught the sapphires at her throat. "Surely there is no confusion, Elder. Sir Voss is a guard, a sword, a useful tool." She let the word tool hang in the air like a jewel she was admiring. But one does not elevate a hunting dog to the throne simply because it bites well. Laughter. Small, controlled, noble laughter. The kind that was designed to humiliate without providing anything concrete enough to challenge. Alara felt the bond pulse, Aldrich's emotions bleeding through. Shame, guilt, and underneath that, a desperate, furious fear she didn't understand. She waited for him to speak, to correct Cordelia, to say something. His golden eyes met hers across the square, and in them she saw the thing she'd been afraid to name for months. Apology. "Sir Voss is my guard," Aldrich said. His voice was clear and carried to every corner. "She is not my Luna. A woman without a wolf is unworthy of standing beside the throne." The world went very quiet. Or perhaps it went very loud and Alara simply stopped hearing it. The words hit her somewhere beneath the mate bond, beneath the muscle and bone, in the place where she had kept every promise he'd ever made her, every dawn patrol together, every battlefield prayer, every whispered "I will always choose you." A woman without a wolf. Unworthy. The nobles were watching her, the soldiers were watching her. Cordelia was watching her with barely concealed satisfaction, her hand still resting on Aldrich's arm like a flag planted on conquered territory. The council watched with the hungry patience of men who had been waiting for this moment. They wanted her to cry. She knew this with the clarity of a sword edge. They wanted her to kneel, to beg, to ask Aldrich to explain, to provide some spectacle of feminine desperation they could reference for years afterward when they needed an example of why wolfless women should not presume. Noctis pressed his nose against her shoulder. His breath was warm and his nostrils flared, and his ears were flat against his skull in the expression she recognized as his battle face. He wanted to charge. He had always wanted to solve problems by charging at them. In this, at least, they were not alike. Alara reached up and unclasped the silver badge from her armor. It was a simple thing, a wolf rampant over a crown, the mark of the royal personal guard. She had worn it since she was 18. It had been pinned over her heart when she'd killed her first enemy wolf. It had been stained with mud, blood, rain, and once, memorably, horse spit when Noctis had sneezed directly onto her chest during an inspection. She held it up so the torchlight caught it. Then she threw it into the snow at Aldrich's feet. The sound it made was very small. The silence that followed was enormous. "Servas," Aldrich began. "That's the last order I'll follow," she said. Her voice was steady. She would make it steady if it killed her. "And I wasn't a dog, Your Highness. I was the only one willing to stand between you and every blade aimed at your throat. The dog was whoever taught you to call it nothing." She turned. She mounted Noctis in a single fluid motion that sent a lance of pain through her injured wrist, but she'd mounted this horse in worse condition, with a broken rib once, with an arrow shaft still lodged in her thigh once, during a thunderstorm that had driven every other horse in the stable to panic. This was nothing. This was just her heart. Noctis needed no command. He surged forward, and the crowd parted, not for her, but for him, because he was 16 hands of black fury, and he had a documented history of biting anyone who didn't move fast enough. Behind her, she heard Aldrich call her name. She did not turn. They reached the drawbridge before the shouting started. The royal city of Arventhor was built on a high plateau, accessible only through the Great Gate and its ancient drawbridge over the Frostclaw Gorge. The bridge was wide enough for 4 horses abreast, paved in dark stone, and flanked by carved wolf statues that had watched 1,000 years of comings and goings with the same blank expression. Noctis's hooves rang against the stone. Below, the gorge dropped into mist and darkness. Above, the sky was the color of a bruise, violet and black and swollen with snow that had not yet fallen. Alara stopped at the center of the bridge. The mate bond hummed inside her chest. She could feel Aldrich through it, his panic, his guilt, his fury at himself, his desperate certainty that she would come back. She always came back. She had always come back. After every slight, every public humiliation, every whispered insult from courtiers who called her the wolfless shadow, the broken blade, the guard who warmed the prince's bed because she couldn't warm his throne, she had swallowed it and she had come back. Not tonight. She closed her eyes. She reached inside herself, past the pain in her wrist, past the exhaustion in her bones, past 10 years of loving a man who could announce her worthlessness to the entire kingdom and still expect her to return. She found the bond. It was there, golden and warm, woven into the center of her being like a thread spun from sunlight. It connected her to Aldrich, his heartbeat, his breath, his wolf. She had lived with it for so long that she no longer remembered what silence felt like. She wrapped her will around it, and she pulled. The pain was immediate and absolute. It felt like reaching into her own chest and tearing out a rib. No, worse. It felt like reaching into her soul and ripping out the part that had learned to love. The golden thread screamed as it frayed. Noctis shrieked beneath her, rearing, because he could feel it too. The shockwave of a fated bond being forcibly severed, something so unnatural that even the stones of the bridge seemed to shudder. She didn't stop. She pulled until the thread snapped. The silence that followed was the most terrible sound she had ever heard. She swayed in the saddle. The world tilted. The gorge gaped below her like a mouth, and for one dizzying moment she thought she was going to fall, off the horse, off the bridge, into the dark. Noctis caught her. Not literally, because horses didn't catch people, but he did what he always did when she was about to break. He planted his hooves, lowered his massive body, and shifted his weight so that she fell forward against his neck, instead of sideways into nothing. His mane was coarse and warm against her face. He stood absolutely still, his breath steaming in the cold, and he waited. She pressed her forehead against his neck and did not cry. After a long moment, she straightened. Her chest felt hollowed out, as if someone had scooped out everything soft and left only bone and determination. "Okay," she whispered. Noctis flicked one ear. Forward. He walked, steady, sure, carrying her off the bridge and onto the mountain road beyond the gate, into the snow and the dark and the vast, empty world that no longer had a golden thread connecting it to a man who had called her unworthy. Behind her, inside the city, she thought she heard a wolf howl. Aldrich's wolf, recognizing the severance, screaming into the night. She did not look back. Chapter 2. The Night Between. The stable widow's name was Marin. She had been waiting at the last way station before the mountain road, a stone shelter built into the cliff face, half hidden by snow, used by border patrols and occasionally by women leaving the royal city in circumstances that did not permit the main gate. Marin was 47, sturdy as an oak barrel, with iron-gray hair braided tight against her skull and hands that had seen more horse ailments than any noble healer had seen human ones. She had run the lower stables of Arventhor for 20 years, and in all that time she had been invisible. Nobles did not notice the woman who fed their horses. They noticed only when the horse was lame, and then they blamed her. Alara had noticed her. At 14, new to the guard barracks and friendless, Alara had spent more time in the lower stables than in the training yard because the horses didn't care that she had no wolf. Marin had found her there one night, a skinny blonde girl asleep in a hay pile with a wild yearling standing guard over her, and had simply draped a blanket over her and said nothing. In the years since, their friendship had been conducted almost entirely through the horse. Marin treated Noctis's hooves, trimmed his mane, checked his teeth, adjusted his saddle, mixed his feed, and reported his moods to Alara with the clinical precision of a field medic. She was the only person besides Alara that Noctis tolerated, and even that tolerance had limits. He'd bitten through 2 of her leather aprons, and once deliberately stood on her foot during a shoeing. Now Marin stood at the way station door with a lantern in one hand and a feed bag in the other, and she looked at Alara with the expression of a woman who had already heard the news and had been packed for 3 hours. "I changed his shoes this afternoon," Marin said, handing Alara the feed bag. "New iron, good grip for mountain snow. There's a poultice in the left saddlebag for that wrist. Don't argue, I can see the blood from here. And I packed dried meat, grain, 2 water skins, and the herb mix he likes. The one with the fennel." Alara stared at her. "How did you—" "I know that horse." Marin jerked her chin toward Noctis, who was already nosing the feed bag with the aggressive enthusiasm of an animal who believed every meal might be his last. "He's been agitated for 3 days, stamping, refusing the stable, snapping at the grooms. He knew before you did." Noctis lifted his head from the feed bag long enough to snort in what sounded like confirmation. Alara dismounted. The pain in her chest, the hollow, torn-open cavity where the bond had been, flared so intensely that she grabbed the saddle to stay upright. Marin reached for her arm, steadied her, said nothing about the way Alara's face had gone white. "I don't know where you're going tonight," Marin said. Her voice was quiet, practical, the voice of a woman who had lived her entire life in a world that undervalued practical women and had stopped expecting it to change. "But he knows." She nodded toward Noctis. "He's been impatient to take you away." Alara's throat closed. She wanted to say something. "Thank you," or "goodbye," or "I'm sorry I never spoke up when the stable master shorted your wages," or "you deserved better than this invisible life." But Marin was already adjusting Noctis's girth strap, checking the saddlebag buckles, running her hands along his legs the way she'd done 1,000 times. "The border road is passable as far as the Grey Mark," Marin said. "After that, you'll be in disputed territory. The enemy factions patrol the passes after dark, but they don't usually bother lone riders. Too much trouble for too little gain. She paused. Unless the rider is someone important. I'm not important. Marin looked at her with eyes that held 20 years of watching a wolfless girl become the strongest knight in the kingdom. You're important to him, she said, and touched Noctis's nose. That's enough for me. Noctis bumped Marin's hand with his massive head, and then, in a display of affection so rare that Alara almost lost her composure, he lowered his nose and breathed gently on the older woman's hair. Go, Marin said. And when you get where you're going, check his left foreleg. He's been favoring it, but he won't show you until it suits him. Stubborn creature. Alara mounted. The pain pulsed. Noctis moved beneath her, steady as stone. She rode into the snowfield. She made it 4 miles before the first backlash hit. The broken bond didn't heal cleanly. She had known it wouldn't. The old text said that severing a fated bond was like amputating a limb, except the limb was made of emotion, and the phantom pain lasted forever. What the old texts hadn't mentioned was the sound. A wolf howling inside her skull, not her wolf, because she didn't have one, but the echo of Aldrich's wolf, trapped in the remnant of the bond like a voice caught in an empty room. The pain doubled her over. Noctis stopped immediately, his ears swiveling back, and when she slumped against his neck, he turned his head and nudged her knee with his nose. Hard, repeatedly, as if to say, you are not allowed to fall off. I did not carry you this far for you to fall off in a snowfield like a sack of turnips. I'm fine, she lied. He stomped his hoof. I'm mostly fine. He stomped again, harder. Shut up. He didn't shut up. He stood in the middle of the snowfield and made increasingly offended noises until she straightened in the saddle and took the reins. Then, and only then, did he continue walking, at a pace that suggested he was doing her a tremendous personal favor. The snowfield was vast and empty under the moon. The border mountains rose to the west, dark and jagged, and the wind came down from the peaks carrying the scent of pine and stone and distance. Alara had patrolled this territory 100 times. She knew every ridge, every frozen stream, every abandoned watchtower. She had never ridden it alone at night, in pain, with no badge and no bond and no name except the one she'd been born with. It was, she thought grimly, a terrible night to be free. Chapter 3: Wolves in the Snow. They came from the north. She heard them before she saw them. The crunch of paws in snow, the low, coordinated breathing of wolves running in formation. Not feral wolves, werewolves. Shifted, moving fast, cutting across the snowfield in a flanking arc designed to close a trap. Alara's hand found her sword hilt. The motion sent a bolt of agony through her torn wrist, but she gripped anyway because the alternative was dying, and she had not ripped her own soul in half just to bleed out in a snowfield. Noctis felt her shift. His ears went flat. His stride lengthened. He knew this, the prelude to violence, and unlike most horses, he did not shy from it. He leaned into it. There were 6, no, 8, dark-furred, fast, moving in pairs. They weren't border wolves. Their formation was too disciplined, their coordination too precise. These were hunters, and they were hunting her. The first one broke from the pack and lunged. Alara drew her sword and cut. The motion was instinct. 10 years of training, 1,000 sparring sessions, 100 real fights. The blade caught moonlight as it arced, and the wolf yelped as the flat of the sword cracked across its skull. She didn't use the edge. She didn't need to kill. She needed to break the formation. Noctis screamed, a high, furious sound that no well-bred warhorse should make, and kicked backward with both hind legs. The wolf behind them tumbled, rolled, scrambled up dazed. 2 more came from the left. Alara wheeled Noctis, and he responded like the warhorse he was, pivoting on his haunches, surging forward, driving his armored chest into the nearest wolf and sending it sprawling. She swung the sword again, flat side, and felt the impact jar up her arm. But there were too many, and her wrist was failing. The torn ligaments protested every swing, and the backlash pain in her chest was still there, still throbbing, making her reactions a half-second slow. A wolf snapped at Noctis's leg. She kicked it away. Another lunged for her saddle. She smashed the pommel into its nose. The pack was regrouping. She could see it, the shift in their pattern, the way the remaining wolves were spreading out to encircle rather than attack head-on. They were adapting to her fighting style. That meant they'd been briefed. That meant someone had sent them. She was going to get off this horse and fight on foot, because from the ground she could protect Noctis's legs. She would not let them hurt him. She could take a wound. She could take 10 wounds. He could not. She swung down. Noctis tried to follow, and she shoved his head away. "Go! Run!" He didn't. He never did. He simply planted himself behind her like a black wall and bared his teeth at the circling wolves with an expression that said, "Come closer. I dare you. I have been wanting to bite something all day." Alara raised her sword with both hands. The wrist screamed. She ignored it. She set her feet in the snow and waited. The wolves charged. And then, light. Not torchlight, not moonlight. Something brighter and hotter, a blue-white flare that split the darkness like a blade. It came from the ridge above the snowfield, accompanied by the sound of hooves, fast, controlled, descending, and a voice that carried across the snow with a calm, almost conversational authority. "That's enough." A rider appeared on the ridge. He was silhouetted against the moonlit sky, and for a moment all Alara could see was the outline. Broad shoulders, a dark cloak, a horse that was almost as large as Noctis. Then he descended, and the moonlight found his face, and Alara's breath caught in a way that had nothing to do with pain. He was beautiful. Not beautiful the way Aldrich was beautiful, sharp and golden and bright. This was a different kind of beauty. Dark, cool, dangerous, the way a winter storm was beautiful when you watched it from a cliff's edge. Black hair pushed back from a face carved in clean, sharp lines, eyes the color of pale frost, blue-gray, almost silver, set beneath dark brows, a jawline like a blade. A mouth that looked like it had been designed specifically to deliver devastating statements with no warning. He rode a pale gray warhorse, and he moved with the absolute ease of a man who had been born on horseback and had never once in his life been thrown. Behind him, on the ridge, she could see more riders, an escort held back. The wolves stopped. They didn't flee, they simply stopped mid-charge, as if a leash had been pulled taut. Their heads lowered, their tails dropped. One of them whined. The stranger rode down into the snowfield. His pale horse picked its way through the snow with fastidious precision, and the rider's eyes swept the scene. The circling wolves, the blood in the snow, the woman standing alone with a shaking sword, the black warhorse behind her with murder in his eyes. His gaze settled on Alara. He studied her for a moment. The bloody armor, the torn wrist, the defiant stance, the absence of any wolf aura whatsoever. And something shifted in his expression. Not pity. Pity she could have identified and rejected. This was something closer to interest. "They're mine," he said, nodding toward the wolves. "Border Patrol. They were supposed to be tracking a supply convoy." He paused, "Not chasing injured women through snowfields." One of the wolves shifted, bones cracking, fur receding, into a man. He was young, scarred, sheepish. "My lord, she came out of the royal city. We thought—" "I know what you thought. You were wrong." The stranger's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Fall back, all of you." They fell back. Every wolf, immediately. No hesitation, no argument. This was not the obedience of fear. It was the obedience of absolute authority, the kind that was so certain of itself it never needed to shout. The stranger dismounted. He was tall, taller than Aldrich, with the build of a man who fought regularly and well. He moved toward Alara, and she raised her sword. "Stay back." He stopped. He looked at the sword, then at her wrist, then at the blood soaking through her glove. "Your grip is failing on the right side," he said. "Your wrist is either fractured or badly torn. You've been riding for at least 4 hours in this cold, which means the tissue is swelling inside the wrap, and if you swing that sword one more time, you're going to lose the use of your hand for a month." He paused. I have a field medic with my escort and horse feed. The mention of horse feed almost undid her. Not for herself, she could have borne any amount of suffering, but Noctis had been carrying her for hours, had fought beside her, had not been fed since Marin's way station. Behind her, Noctis's ears pricked at the word feed. You're from the border faction, she said. Her voice was flat, assessing. The Kelrith Wolves. I'm the lord of the Kelrith Wolves, he said. Ronan Kelrith. He inclined his head, not a bow, an acknowledgement. And you are the woman who just fought off 8 of my best hunters with a broken wrist and a horse that appears to be personally offended by the existence of wolves. Noctis snorted. It was his most judgmental snort. Ronan's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Something better, the suppression of one. You may leave, or you may stay. Just do not faint in front of my horse. He jerked his chin toward the pale gray warhorse, which was watching the proceedings with an expression of aristocratic boredom. My horse is very fond of reporting incidents. Alara looked at him. The pain in her chest was a constant roar, and her wrist was on fire, and she was alone on an enemy snowfield talking to a man who should, by all logic, be her adversary. But his eyes were steady, and his voice held no mockery, and he had stopped his wolves without violence. Do not worry, she said. I only faint in front of my own horse. It has better manners. This time, Ronan's mouth definitely twitched. Behind her, Noctis did something extraordinary. He lifted his head, looked directly at Ronan, and then turned his body so that he was standing between them, a black wall of horse blocking Ronan's path to Alara entirely. Your horse, Ronan observed, does not like me. My horse doesn't like anyone. A quality I respect. He stepped to the side. Noctis stepped to block him. He stepped the other way. Noctis mirrored him. This continued for 3 full repetitions, with increasing absurdity, until Noctis leaned forward and clamped his teeth onto the edge of Ronan's cloak. Ronan looked down at the horse holding his cloak hostage. He looked up at Alara. His expression was one of absolute perfect composure, marred only slightly by the fact that an angry warhorse was slowly eating his clothing. Is this a negotiation? He asked. He thinks so. What are his terms? Despite everything, despite the pain, the cold, the ruins of her life, Alara felt the corner of her mouth lift. He wants the feed first, and he doesn't share. Ronan reached slowly into his saddlebag, produced a handful of grain, and held it out. Noctis eyed him, eyed the grain, and released the cloak with a contemptuous flip of his head. He took the grain. He chewed it with the air of a king accepting tribute. There, Ronan said. Your bodyguard is appeased. May I approach now, or does the horse require further concessions? Alara sheathed her sword. The motion made black spots dance across her vision, and she reached for Noctis's saddle to steady herself. Ronan's hand caught her elbow. Not her waist, not her shoulders, her elbow, the most neutral point of contact possible. His fingers were warm through the armor, and his grip was firm without being forceful. The medic, he said. Now. She wanted to refuse. She was Alara Voss, the strongest knight in Arventhor, and she did not accept help from enemy lords in snowfields. But Noctis nudged her back, hard, and the world was graying at the edges, and the hollow place where the bond had been was screaming. Fine, she said. But if any of your wolves touch my horse, I'll kill them with my left hand. I believe you, Ronan said, and for the first time she heard something in his voice that sounded genuine. Chapter 4. The Enemy's Hearth. The Kelrith border camp was not what she expected. She had expected a war camp, crude, temporary, designed for aggression. What she found was a mountain stronghold carved into the living rock of the Grey March Pass, with high walls, warm fires, a well-stocked stable, and the general atmosphere of a community that had been here for generations and intended to remain. Ronan's people watched her with curiosity but not hostility. They were border wolves, harder than the court wolves of Arventhor, weathered by wind and war, but there was none of the cruelty she'd been told to expect. The soldiers nodded at their lord. The camp workers moved with purpose. Children, actual children, darted between the buildings, chasing each other through the snow. Alara had been told her entire life that the Kael'rith faction was savage, lawless, dangerous. She was beginning to suspect that whoever had told her that had never actually visited. Noctis was installed in the stable with the ceremony usually reserved for visiting royalty, primarily because he threatened every groom who approached him until Ilara personally introduced them. Even then, he bit one on the sleeve. Ilara pretended not to notice. Noctis pretended he hadn't done it. The groom pretended his sleeve had always been torn. It was a functional arrangement. The medic, a brisk, efficient woman named Helwyn, examined Alara's wrist with the impersonal competence of someone who had treated 100 such injuries and was bored by this one. Torn ligament, deep bruise on the bone, not fractured, which means you're either very lucky or very hard to break. Helwyn wound a clean bandage with hands that could have performed surgery in a thunderstorm. 3 weeks minimum before you swing a sword. 4 would be better. I'll need it in 2. Then you'll lose the wrist. I'll need it in 2, Alara repeated. Helwyn gave her a look that conveyed in a single glance an entire medical textbook's worth of disapproval. Then she packed the wrist with a poultice that smelled like winter herbs and fire, wrapped it tight, and said, 2 weeks, but if it snaps, don't come crying to me. Alara didn't intend to come crying to anyone. She hadn't cried in 6 years. Ronan appeared after the medic left. He'd removed his riding cloak and wore a dark wool tunic beneath, and in the firelight of the stone chamber, the sharp planes of his face were thrown into relief. He set a tray on the table: bread, dried meat, hot broth, water. When did you last eat? She tried to remember. The morning? No, yesterday morning. She'd been in the saddle since before dawn for the border run that had ended in the ambush, and after the ambush there had been the parade, and after the parade there had been the bridge. Recently, she lied. He studied her. Those frost-pale eyes missed nothing. You're a terrible liar. I suspect that's unusual for someone who survived 10 years in the Arventhor court. I didn't survive by lying. I survived by being useful. And now? She looked at the fire. The hollow in her chest pulsed. Now I'm not useful to anyone. That, Ronan said, pulling a chair to the table and sitting across from her with the easy grace of a man who owned the room and everyone in it, is the most absurd thing I've heard today, and I spent this morning listening to my scout explain how he lost an entire supply convoy to a badger. She looked at him. A badger. A very determined badger. He pushed the tray toward her. Eat. You're no good to anyone dead, and I have questions. She ate. The broth was hot and good, and the bread was better than anything the royal kitchens had produced in months. And the simple act of eating, of being warm, of being fed, of sitting in a place where no one was calling her worthless, was so overwhelming that she had to stop twice and breathe. Ronan watched her. He said nothing. This, she was learning, was one of his qualities. He knew when silence was more useful than speech. When she'd finished, he asked, "Who sent the hunters after you?" "What hunters?" "The wolves in the snowfield. They weren't mine, not the patrol I'd assigned. Someone else deployed them. Someone who knew you'd be on that road tonight." His eyes were sharp. The Arventhor court isn't known for releasing its assets voluntarily, so who wanted you found? She considered lying. She considered telling him nothing. But the exhaustion was bone deep, and the truth was simple, and she was so tired of navigating the maze of court deception. "The Council of Elders," she said. "They've been watching me for months. They think my bloodline is abnormal." "Abnormal how?" "I don't have a wolf form." "I noticed." "But they think," she stopped. She didn't actually know what they thought. She only knew that the scrutiny had intensified, that Aldrich had become increasingly desperate to distance himself from her publicly, and that the council's questions had grown pointed enough to draw blood. Ronan leaned back. The firelight played across his features, and she was struck again by how composed he was. Not cold, not emotionless, but contained, as if every reaction was filtered through a layer of deliberate thought. The Council of Arventhor has a long history of executing things they don't understand, he said. My grandfather was one of those things. He said it without anger, flat, factual, the way you'd state a historical date. They called him a heretic. They burned his records. They said the Kelrith bloodline was tainted. This is why we're on the border instead of in the court. We weren't exiled for being weak. We were exiled for being inconvenient. Alara looked at him. There was more to this story. She could see it in the careful way he held himself, the measured cadence of his words. But he didn't push, and she recognized a man who would share his history in his own time. I should leave in the morning, she said. I'm not safe to be around. If the council tracks me here, then the council will find that crossing the Grey March in winter is considerably more difficult than writing decrees from a warm throne room. He stood. You can leave in the morning, or you can rest. The room is yours. The stable is Noctis's. And the medic will kill me if you don't sleep at least 6 hours. And she is the only person in this camp I'm genuinely afraid of. He moved toward the door. Something made her speak. Why are you helping me? Ronan paused. He didn't turn immediately. When he did, his expression was unreadable. Because I came to investigate strange movements from the royal city's army, he said. And instead I found a woman who was wounded, bond broken, hunted, and still able to leave 8 of my best wolves limping back to camp. He paused. I'm a strategist, Sir Voss. I don't waste interesting variables. He left. Alara sat by the fire and pressed her hand to the hollow in her chest and wondered when exactly she had stopped being a person and become a variable. It was, she thought, an improvement. Chapter 5. Phantom Pains. She woke before dawn with claws in her chest. Not real claws, the phantom sensation of the broken bond raking across her sternum as if trying to dig its way back to the heart she'd torn it from. The pain was so intense that she rolled off the cot and hit the stone floor, gasping, her back arched, her fingers scrabbling against cold rock. The echo of Aldrich's wolf howled in her ears. Not words. Wolves didn't speak in words, but emotion, raw and ragged. Loss, confusion, the desperate searching of an animal that had been severed from its other half and couldn't understand why. She pressed her forehead to the floor, breathed, counted, waited. It passed. It always passed. But each morning it was a little worse, a little longer, a little louder, and each morning she had to spend a few more seconds reminding herself that she had chosen this, that the alternative, staying, submitting, letting the bond remain as a leash in the hands of a man who called her unworthy, was worse than any phantom pain. She dressed, checked her wrist, swollen, stiff, but mobile, went to the stable. Noctis was awake. He was always awake before her, standing in his stall with the alert posture of a horse who believed that sleep was for the weak and that vigilance was the only reasonable response to existence. When she entered, he tossed his head and made a low, rumbling sound that she had learned over the years was his version of concern. She checked his hooves first. Then his legs, the left foreleg as Marin had warned, showed a slight heat at the fetlock. She wrapped it with practiced hands, murmuring to him as she worked. Then his mane, which was tangled because he fought every groom who tried to brush it. Then his saddle straps. Then his feed. It was the ritual. It had always been the ritual. Take care of the horse first, because the horse would never lie to you about whether it needed help. Marin says hello, she told him, even though Marin hadn't technically said that. She says you're stubborn. Noctis lowered his head and pressed his nose against her hair. His breath was warm and smelled like grain. He stayed there for a long moment, breathing, and she stood very still and let him, because this was the closest either of them came to saying, I'm worried about you. She found Ronan in the camp's upper ward, standing at a stone parapet overlooking the Grey March Pass. The dawn was coming up gray and silver behind the mountains, and the wind carried the scent of snow. You're up early, he said, without turning. The bond wakes me. He did turn then. His eyes, those impossible silver blue eyes, dropped to her chest, not in the way of a man looking at a woman's body, but in the way of a healer locating a wound. The backlash, he said, from the severance. You know about it. I know that severing a fated mate bond is supposed to be impossible. I know that the old texts describe it as tearing the soul in half. I know that the last person recorded to have done it died within a year. He paused. I also know that the old texts were written by the Council of Elders, and the Council has a documented habit of exaggerating threats to discourage people from making choices the Council doesn't approve of. She leaned against the parapet. The stone was ice cold through her shirt. You sound like you've studied this. I've studied everything the Council has tried to hide. It's a hobby. His mouth quirked. A dangerous hobby, which is the best kind. She was quiet for a moment. Below the parapet, the camp was stirring. Smoke from the kitchens, voices, the sound of horses being led to water. Normal sounds, life sounds. She had spent so long in the polished silence of the Arventhor court that she had forgotten what a real, living settlement sounded like. I need to keep moving, she said. If I stay, I put your people at risk. My people have been at risk since before you were born. The Council considers our existence an insult. He turned to face her fully. Where would you go? She didn't answer because she didn't know. For 10 years, her identity had been defined by her role, Sir Alara Voss, Royal Personal Guard, the Crown Prince's blade, the wolfless knight who fought harder than any shifted wolf. Without that role, without the badge, without the bond, she was just a woman with a sword and a bad-tempered horse. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like standing in an open field after years in a stone cell. The space was overwhelming, but it was space. I'll figure it out, she said. I don't doubt it. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't entirely read, something between respect and something warmer. But consider this, you're injured, hunted, and alone. I have walls, a medic, and a stable full of feed. You could stay until you're healed, at minimum. Consider it a strategic alliance. An alliance with an enemy lord. An enemy lord who is currently the only person between here and the royal city who hasn't tried to kill you. He paused. The bar is low. I'm aware. She almost laughed. She didn't. The hollow in her chest made laughing feel like pulling stitches, but the impulse was there, and it surprised her. 1 week, she said. Then I go. 1 week, he agreed. She pushed off the parapet and walked toward the stairs. Behind her, Ronan said, Sir Voss. She stopped. In the snowfield, the way you fought, with a broken wrist and no wolf against 8 shifted wolves. His voice was quiet. I've commanded warriors my entire life. I've never seen anything like it. She didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't used to compliments that sounded like they meant something. She went to check Noctis's foreleg again. Chapter 6. The Testing. 3 days passed. Alara trained. She trained because it was the only language she had for processing what had happened to her. Sword forms with her left hand while the right wrist healed. Footwork in the snow. Endurance drills that left her gasping and shaking and momentarily free of the phantom pain. Ronan's soldiers watched her. At first, they watched with the careful hostility of wolves assessing a stranger. By the second day, the hostility had shifted to curiosity. By the third, 2 of them asked to spar. She put them both on the ground in under 40 seconds, left-handed. After that, a young wolf named Brennan, 22, broad-shouldered, freckled, with the eager energy of a puppy who hadn't yet learned to stop chasing his own tail, attached himself to her training sessions like a burr on a saddle blanket. You fight different, Brennan said, sprawled in the snow after she'd swept his legs for the 4th time that morning. Wolves fight with strength. You fight like water. You go around everything. I fight like someone who can't shift, she said. If I fought like a wolf, I'd lose every time, so I don't fight like a wolf. Brennan sat up, brushing snow from his red hair. That's brilliant. That's survival. Same thing, isn't it? He grinned at her, and it was the grin of a young man who was uncomplicated in a world that rewarded complication. Straightforward, warm, slightly stupid. She liked him immediately. "You're too nice for a border wolf," she told him. "My mother says the same thing. She says I'm a disgrace to the Kilrith reputation, and I should practice scowling more." He demonstrated a scowl. It looked like a constipated squirrel. Alara kept her face neutral. "Needs work." "Lord Ronan scowls naturally. It's very unfair. Some people just have the face for it." From across the training yard, Ronan's voice carried. "I heard that, Brennan." "I meant it as a compliment, my lord." "It wasn't." Brennan winked at Alara. "He likes you, by the way. I can tell because he hasn't threatened to reassign me to the South Watchtower yet, and he usually does that within the first hour of someone new arriving. He doesn't like me. He's being strategic." "That's what he said the last time someone asked him why he kept your horse in the best stall." Brennan paused. "Your horse bit me, by the way." Brennan flopped back into the snow with a hand over his heart. "If I were less afraid of Lord Ronan, I would propose immediately." Across the yard, Ronan did not look up from tightening a saddle strap. An excellent survival instinct, Brennan. Alara looked from one man to the other. "Was that jealousy?" "No," Ronan said. "Border security. He bites everyone." "He didn't bite Lord Ronan." That was true, and it bothered her. Noctis had, after the initial cloak incident, developed a grudging tolerance for Ronan that he extended to no one else in the camp. He still snorted when Ronan passed his stall. He still tossed his head, but he didn't bite. He didn't kick. Once, she had caught him accepting a carrot from Ronan's hand with an air of tremendous condescension, as if the carrot were barely adequate, but he was willing to overlook its deficiencies. "Horses know things," Brennan said sagely. "My grandmother always said that if a horse trusts a man, the man's worth trusting." "Your grandmother never met my horse." On the fourth night, the backlash hit differently. She was walking the camp perimeter. She did this every night, because the habits of a guard didn't die just because the badge had been thrown in the snow, when the pain in her chest erupted without warning. Not the usual dawn ache, but a searing, blinding agony that dropped her to her knees. The Bond remnant was screaming. Aldrich was doing something, reaching through the broken connection, trying to find her, sending his wolf spirit howling into the void between them. She could feel it. His desperation, his fury, his guilt. Not words, but emotions so raw they were almost tangible. He was looking for her. He was using every scrap of the destroyed bond to try to sense where she was. She pressed her hands flat against the frozen ground and breathed through her teeth. The pain was a wolf's jaw clamped around her ribs, tightening with every heartbeat. A hand on her shoulder, warm, steady. "Breathe." Ronan's voice. She hadn't heard him approach. He was kneeling beside her in the snow, his hand a firm pressure on her shoulder, his face close enough that she could see the concern he was trying to mask with composure. "Don't," she started. "I know. Don't touch you. Don't pity you. Don't make it about me." His voice was low and even, the voice of someone who had talked people through pain before. "I'm not doing any of those things. I'm keeping you from falling face first into a snowbank. There's a difference." She laughed. It came out as a gasp, broken and sharp, but it was a laugh, and it cut through the pain just enough to let her breathe. And then something happened that neither of them expected. The pain eased. Not gradually. Suddenly, like a hand had been placed over the wound, the screaming in her chest dimmed, the phantom claws retracted. She could breathe, she could see, she could feel the cold snow under her knees and the weight of Ronan's hand on her shoulder. And beneath that, something else, a vibration, a resonance, as if some frequency inside her was responding to some frequency inside him. Ronan felt it too. She could tell by the way his hand tightened on her shoulder, by the slight hitch in his breathing, by the way his eyes widened a fraction. "What is that?" she whispered. "I don't know." His voice was very careful. "But my wolf just went completely calm, and my wolf is never calm." They looked at each other. The moonlight was cold and blue, and the snow was falling in light, spinning flakes, and his face was very close to hers, and the resonance between them was like a note being held on a string, Not painful, not forced, just there. "This doesn't mean anything," she said, pulling back. "Of course not." He stood and offered her his hand. She took it, because the alternative was struggling to her feet alone in the snow and possibly falling over, and she had already performed enough dramatic collapses for 1 week. His grip was warm and firm and lingered exactly 1 second longer than necessary. "For the record," he said as she regained her footing, "my wolf has never done that before. Not for anyone." "Maybe your wolf has low standards." "My wolf has notoriously high standards. It's insufferable." She pulled her hand from his. The resonance faded, but not entirely. A ghost of it remained, humming in her bones like the memory of warmth. "Good night, Lord Kelrith." "Good night, Sir Voss," he paused. "And Ronan. Just Ronan. Lord Kelrith sounds like my father, and my father was not a pleasant man." "Good night, Ronan." He watched her go. She could feel it, his gaze on her back, steady and warm and impossible to ignore. Chapter 7. The X Arrives. Aldrich came on the 6th day. He came with an escort of 20 Crown Guard wolves, riding the great white warhorse that had been his since his investiture, wearing the black and gold of the royal house and carrying enough authority to make the mountains themselves feel inadequate. He also came, Ilara noticed from the upper parapet where she was training, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. The golden sharpness of his features had gone gaunt. His eyes were shadowed. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscles stood out like ropes. Good, she thought, and then hated herself for thinking it, and then decided she was allowed to think it. Ronan met Aldrich at the gate. The two men faced each other across 6 feet of snow, and the temperature of the camp dropped by several degrees. Not literally, but the effect was convincing. 2 alpha wolves, 2 lords, 2 very handsome men who immediately and instinctively disliked each other. Crown Prince Aldrich. Ronan's voice was the ice-smooth courtesy of a man who could kill you while discussing the weather. "What brings you to the Greymark? I wasn't aware the Crown took an interest in our humble border." Aldrich's golden eyes swept the camp, found Ilara on the parapet, locked onto her with an intensity that made the bond remnant throb. "You have something of mine," Aldrich said. The temperature dropped further. Beside Ilara on the parapet, Brennan muttered, "Oh, this is going to be good." Ronan didn't move, didn't blink. "I don't have anything of yours, Your Highness. I have a guest who arrived of her own free will, injured and hunted, and who is welcome to leave whenever she chooses." He paused. "Would you like to specify what you believe you've lost? I keep thorough records." Aldrich dismounted. His wolf was close to the surface. She could see it in the amber flare of his eyes, the way his movements had gone too smooth, too controlled. He walked toward the gate. Ronan did not step aside. "Lord Kelrith." Aldrich's voice was quiet, and that was worse than shouting. Ilara had heard him quiet before. Quiet meant the wolf was in charge. "I am not here to negotiate. I am here for my—" "Your what?" Ronan's voice was silk over steel. "Your guard?" She threw her badge in the snow. "Your mate? From what I understand, you declared her unworthy in front of your entire court. Your property?" One dark eyebrow rose. "I wasn't aware the Crown had started claiming people as possessions. That's an unfortunate regression." Behind Ronan, 2 Kelrith soldiers shifted their weight. Not aggressively, just a reminder that the Lord of the Greymarch had backup. Aldrich's jaw worked. "I need to speak with her, alone. Then ask her." Both men looked up at the parapet. Ilara looked down at them, 2 alpha wolves bristling at each other in the snow like overgrown tomcats arguing over territory, and felt the absurd impulse to dump a bucket of water on both of them. Instead, she descended the stairs, walked through the courtyard, and stopped 10 feet from Aldrich. He looked at her. The bond remnant surged, not his emotions anymore because the bond was broken, but the echo of them, the phantom memory of how he used to look at her when they were alone. As if she were the only real thing in a world made of politics and duty. "Ilara." His voice cracked on her name. "Your Highness." The formality hit him like a slap. She saw it. the flinch, the way his hands curled at his sides. "Don't call me that." "Why not? It's your title. You made very clear what titles I'm allowed to use and which ones I'm not." Silence. Behind Aldrich, his soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Behind Alara, Ronan stood perfectly still, watching with the expression of a man who was cataloging everything for future reference. "The council has decided to judge you publicly," Aldrich said, and his voice was low and urgent. "They've declared your bloodline suspicious. They're calling you a heretic. If they find you, then they'll find me. That's no longer your concern." "It is my concern. You are my—" "What?" She took a step closer. The pain in her chest was searing, but she held his gaze with the same steady focus she used on a battlefield. "Your guard? Your mate? Your convenient excuse? Pick one, Aldrich. Pick one and say it to my face, the way you said the other thing to my face 6 days ago." He flinched again. "You don't understand. I said those things because the council was going to imprison you. They discovered your bloodline is abnormal. They suspect you're the heir to the ancient Moon Wolf line, and they threatened to lock you in the Moon Tower for verification. I thought if I publicly denied you, they'd believe you were unimportant. I was trying to protect." "You were trying to protect me," she said. Her voice was even, controlled, the way a blade was controlled before the cut. "By humiliating me in front of every person I'd bled for. By letting Cordelia call me a hunting dog. By standing there in your crown and your gold and telling the world I was nothing." "I didn't say you were nothing. You said I was unworthy. In front of the council, in front of the guard I served for 10 years, in front of soldiers who followed me into battle." She paused. "You could have told me. You could have warned me. You could have pulled me aside and said, 'The council is after you, and I need to pretend, and I need you to play along.' You could have given me the choice. But you didn't, because you never once considered that I might have an opinion about my own protection." Aldrich opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Ronan did not step in front of her. He only removed one black glove with unhurried precision. "I am not interrupting," he said. "I am simply preparing for the possibility that His Highness forgets how distance works." For the first time since arriving at the gate, Aldrich looked at him as if the Border Lord had become a blade pointed directly at his throat. "Come back with me," he said. "I can still fix this. I can." "No." The word landed in the snow between them like a dropped sword. "Alara." "I said no. You don't get to make this decision for me. Not anymore." She stepped back. "Go home, Aldrich." His wolf surged. She saw it in the amber flood of his eyes, the sudden tension in his frame, and then, instinct, habit, 10 years of being his alpha and her soldier, he reached for the command. "Alara, stop!" It was an alpha command. Full force, the bone-deep compulsion that every wolf obeyed, the vocal weapon that could pin a subordinate in place with a word. It hit her like a wall. And it bounced. She didn't stop. She didn't even flinch. The command washed over her like water over stone, and she kept walking, and Aldrich stood in the snow with his mouth open and his command echoing uselessly in the cold air. She had torn the bond. His command had no anchor. The realization hit him visibly. His face went white. Not angry white, not frustrated white, but the white of a man who has just understood, for the first time, the full scope of what he has lost. She broke it. His voice was barely audible. She actually broke it. Ronan, still standing by the gate, said nothing. But his eyes followed Alara as she walked back into the camp, and his expression, just for a moment, was the expression of a man watching someone walk through fire and emerge still standing. Brennan appeared beside Ronan and whispered, "That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen." "Yes," Ronan said quietly. "It was." Chapter 8. The Moonlit Pass. Aldrich didn't leave. He couldn't. His escort made camp outside the Kael'rith walls, and he sent 3 separate messages requesting to speak with Alara again. She ignored all of them. Ronan delivered the messages to her personally, each one sealed with the royal wolf crest in black wax, and each time she shook her head. "He's persistent. Ronan observed, placing the third scroll on the table between them. They were in the upper hall, a stone room warmed by 2 fires, and the scroll sat between their cups of hot cider like a small, unwanted guest. "He thinks I'll change my mind." "Will you?" She looked at him. The firelight made his pale eyes warm. "No." "Good." He picked up the scroll and tossed it into the nearest fire without ceremony. "I was running out of table space." That night, Ronan asked her to ride with him. Not a romantic ride, a patrol of the moonlit pass, a border lord's routine circuit, checking the watchtowers and the signal fires. But the moon was full, and the pass was beautiful, and she hadn't ridden for pleasure in months. Noctis was delighted. Not visibly, because Noctis did not display delight the way other horses did, with prancing and nickering and general enthusiasm. Noctis displayed delight by being marginally less aggressive than usual, which in his case meant he only snapped at 2 people instead of his customary 5 during saddling. They rode out through the north gate. The pass was silver under the moonlight, the snow untouched, the mountains rising on either side like the walls of a cathedral. Ronan's pale gray horse moved beside Noctis with the diplomatic caution of an animal who had learned that the black horse's personal space was not to be violated. They rode in silence for a while. It was a comfortable silence, not the loaded quiet of 2 people avoiding a subject, but the easy quiet of 2 people who didn't need to fill the air. "Tell me about the moon wolf," Alara said eventually. Ronan glanced at her. "You don't know?" "The council doesn't teach wolfless girls their mythology." His jaw tightened, a flash of anger quickly controlled. "It's not mythology, it's history. The moon wolf was the first wolf, the oldest bloodline, the line that existed before the councils, before the crowns, before the pack hierarchies. The moon wolf didn't rule packs, it judged them. It was the balance. When a king became a tyrant, the moon wolf could strip his power. When a council grew corrupt, the moon wolf could dissolve it. And the council thinks The council is afraid of you. That's why they want you locked up. Not because your bloodline is suspicious, but because if you're what they think you are, you have the authority to tear down everything they've built." He paused. "The moon wolf doesn't shift, Alara. Not the way other wolves do. The ancient texts, the ones the council tried to destroy, the ones my grandfather preserved, they say the moon wolf's power doesn't manifest as a form. It manifests as a judgment, a presence. Every wolf in range must submit, must kneel." The wind picked up. Alara's hair, golden, long unbound because she'd stopped wearing the knight's braid when she'd thrown away the badge, streamed behind her. The moonlight caught it, and for a moment, something on her collarbone glowed. Just a flicker, a faint silver light, like a mark beneath the skin. Ronan's horse stopped. Ronan stopped, his eyes fixed on her throat. "What?" The backlash hit. Not the usual dawn pain. This was the broken bond reacting to the full moon, to Aldrich's presence at the edge of the pass, to some deep tide in her blood that she didn't understand. The phantom claws tore at her chest. She doubled over in the saddle. Noctis sidestepped, alarmed. Ronan reached. His hand caught her arm. The contact detonated. She felt it like a thunderclap. Energy, raw, silver, enormous, erupted from the point where his skin touched hers and radiated outward. The mark on her collarbone blazed to life. A crescent, a wolf, a moon, etched in silver light beneath her skin. The air around them vibrated. The snow lifted from the ground in a fine mist. The mountains seemed to hold their breath. Ronan's wolf surfaced. She could see it in his eyes, the irises going full silver, the pupils contracting to points, and then his knees buckled, not from weakness, from compulsion. His wolf was bowing, kneeling, submitting to the thing inside her that was older than any alpha. He went down on one knee in the snow, his hand still gripping her arm, his head bowed. The resonance between them was a living thing now, enormous, warm, undeniable. The light faded, the pain receded, the mark dimmed. Silence. The horses stood perfectly still. Even Noctis was quiet, which might have been the most supernatural event of the entire evening. Ronan looked up at her from one knee in the snow. His pale eyes were wide, his dark hair windswept, his face lit by the last traces of silver light. He was breathing hard. "Well," he said, "that was unexpected." She stared at him. "You're not angry." "Why would I be angry?" Your wolf, it forced you to." "My wolf did what my wolf wanted to do." He stood, brushing snow from his knee with a composed precision that was entirely undermined by the slight color in his cheeks. "If this is my fate, at least it has excellent taste." She looked at him, the moonlight in his hair, the half-smile on his mouth, the way he stood there in the snow as if having his wolf forcibly submit to her was merely an interesting development rather than a catastrophic insult to his alpha dignity. Something cracked inside her chest. Not the bond, that was gone. Something else. Something that had been frozen solid since the parade square, since the words unworthy and hunting dog and a woman without a wolf. "You should be afraid of me," she said. "I'm not. Every alpha should be afraid of this." "I'm not every alpha." He stepped closer. Not aggressively, carefully, the way you'd approach something precious and skittish. "And I don't think you want people to be afraid of you. I think you want someone who sees what you are and doesn't run." The wind blew between them. Her golden hair caught the moonlight. His frost-pale eyes held hers. "We should go back," she said. "Probably." Neither of them moved. Noctis broke the moment by shoving his head between them and snorting directly into Ronan's face. "Your horse," Ronan said, wiping horse breath off his cheek, "has impeccable timing." "He thinks so." They rode back in silence, but it was a different silence now, charged, alive, full of everything they hadn't said. Chapter 9. The Revel Arrives. Cordelia Ashworth arrived 3 days after Aldrich, and she came with an army. Not a real army, a ceremonial one. 12 council guards in silver armor, bearing the official seal of the Elder Council, and a formal decree written on white vellum and stamped with so much wax it could have served as a doorstop. She rode a white palfrey with a braided mane and a jeweled bridle, and she wore a traveling cloak of deep blue velvet trimmed in ermine, and she looked like a painting of a noblewoman designed to make other women feel inadequate. She also looked, Ilara noticed from the parapet, like she hadn't wanted to come. It was in the way Cordelia held her reins, too tight, the knuckles white, and in the set of her mouth, which was not the satisfied smirk of a rival come to gloat, but the compressed line of a woman performing a duty she despised. Ronan met the party at the gate. Aldrich, who had been camped outside the walls for 3 days in increasingly desperate sulking, emerged from his tent to join the proceedings with the energy of a man who had been waiting for something to happen and had gotten the wrong thing. "Lady Cordelia." Ronan's voice carried the particular warmth he reserved for people he intended to make deeply uncomfortable. "What a pleasure. I wasn't expecting visitors from the royal court. Twice in 1 week, I'm beginning to feel popular." Cordelia dismounted with the practiced grace of a woman trained from birth to be decorative. "Lord Caelrith, I come on behalf of the Council of Elders with a formal decree for the person known as Sir Ilara Voss." "The person known as," Ronan repeated. "Not the knight, not the woman. The person known as." His eyebrow rose. The Council's choice of language is, as always, a masterclass in passive hostility. Cordelia's jaw tightened. She unrolled the decree. "By order of the Council of Elders, Ilara Voss is to be returned to the royal city for formal verification of her bloodline. She is to present herself at the Moon Tower within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in her being declared a heretic and judged accordingly." Silence. "Judged accordingly," Ilara said from the parapet. She descended during the speech and now stood at the bottom of the stairs, her arms crossed, her golden hair catching the winter sun. "What does that mean, specifically? Imprisonment? Execution? Being forced to attend another one of the council's interminable ceremonies?" Several of the council guards shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a young man who had served under Ilara during the Eastern Border Campaign, had the decency to look ashamed. Cordelia faced Ilara. Up close, the cracks in her composure were more visible. Her makeup was slightly smudged, her eyes were red-rimmed, her perfect hands trembled almost imperceptibly. "It means," Cordelia said, "that you are to come with me, willingly or otherwise." "And if I refuse?" "Then I am authorized to use the council's authority to compel you." Ronan stepped forward. "The council's authority doesn't extend to my territory, Lady Ashworth. The Greymark has been sovereign since before the current council was formed. Any attempt to compel anyone within my walls will be treated as an act of war." Aldrich, who had been standing in the snow with the expression of a man watching a building burn, spoke. "Cordelia, that's enough." "Don't tell me what's enough." Cordelia's voice was sharp, sharper than Alara had ever heard it. She spun to face Aldrich. "You could have stopped this. You could have told the council the truth, that she's your fated mate, that you rejected her to protect her, that this entire farce was your idea. Instead, you let them send me, your replacement Luna, your consolation prize, to drag her back for judgment." The courtyard went very quiet. Cordelia was shaking, not with anger, with something deeper. Exhaustion, humiliation, years of it compressed into a single moment. "Do you know what my father said when the council named me as a Luna candidate?" She looked at Aldrich and her voice cracked. "He said, 'Finally, you're useful. 23 years of music lessons and etiquette training and learning to walk in heels and smile at men who disgusted me, and the best I could hope for was to be useful as a replacement for a woman you actually loved.'" She turned to Alara. Her eyes were bright with tears she was furious about producing. "I envied you. Did you know that? I hated you and I envied you. Because you could ride, you could fight, you could leave. I have never once in my life been allowed to leave a room without permission." The wind blew. Snow swirled across the courtyard. The council guards stood in their silver armor and looked deeply uncertain about the trajectory of this mission. Alara looked at Cordelia for a long moment. She remembered the parade square, the hunting dog comment, the delicate hand on Aldrich's arm, the crystal chime laugh. She had hated Cordelia for it. She had hated her with the pure, hot fury of a woman who had just been publicly destroyed. But looking at her now, shaking in her blue velvet with smudged makeup and red eyes and the desperate fury of a woman who had finally said the unsayable, Alara saw something she recognized. A cage, different from Alara's but no less real. "You don't have to do this," Alara said. Her voice was quiet, not soft, she didn't do soft, but quiet, in the way of someone stating a fact. "You don't have to bring me back. You can tell the council I refused. You can tell them whatever you want. They'll punish me. They'll punish you anyway. They always punish the messenger." Alara paused. "Unless the messenger stops being a messenger." Cordelia stared at her. Something shifted in her face. Not a dramatic transformation, not a single epiphanic moment, but a slow realignment, like tectonic plates finally settling into a new position. She looked down at the council badge pinned to her cloak. A silver wolf rampant over crossed scepters, the council's mark of authorized representative. She touched it. Then she unpinned it and dropped it in the snow. "My lady," one of the council guards stepped forward. "You can't, the council's authority." "The council can retrieve its own prisoners," Cordelia said. Her voice was still shaking, but it was steady underneath, like a building that trembles but does not fall. "I'm done carrying their leashes." She looked at Alara. "I'm sorry for what I said at the parade. I didn't mean it, no, that's a lie. I meant it because I was jealous and cruel and I wanted to hurt you, but I'm sorry." Alara nodded. It was not forgiveness. Not yet, possibly not ever, but it was acknowledgement, and it was enough. "The council guards can escort Lady Ashworth safely back to the royal city," Ronan said, stepping smoothly into the silence with the diplomatic ease of a man who knew exactly when to take control of a situation. "Or, if she prefers, she's welcome to remain at the Grey March until she's decided her next steps. I have rooms and a surplus of strong cider, and I've been told both are effective remedies for sudden career changes." Cordelia looked at him, and despite everything, the tears, the cold, the crumbling of her entire identity, she almost laughed. "I'll stay. if only because the ride back is long and I'm not ready to face my father. A wise decision. Ronan turned to the council guards. You may deliver a message to the council from me. The message is no. He smiled. It was not a warm smile. They'll know what it means. The guards left. Aldrich remained. He stood in the snow, watching Alara, and his face held the expression of a man who was watching his entire world rearrange itself around him and had no idea how to stop it. Alara. Go home, Aldrich. I can't. I need you to understand. I understand perfectly. You loved me. You were afraid for me. And instead of trusting me with the truth, you made the decision alone. She met his eyes. Every time you tried to protect me, you chose a way that required me to be smaller, to be less, to stand behind you and say nothing while you decided what I was worth. That wasn't love, Aldrich. That was control dressed up in good intentions. He flinched as if she'd hit him. I won't make that mistake again, he said. His voice was raw. No, she said, you won't, because you won't get the chance. She turned and walked back into the camp. Ronan fell into step beside her, not touching, not speaking, just present. Behind them, in the snow, Aldrich stood alone with the broken pieces of his arrogance and finally understood that he had not lost a guard. He had destroyed his own heart. Chapter 10. The week that changed everything. The week of recovery became 2 weeks and then 3. The excuse was Alara's wrist. It was healing, but slowly. And Helwyn the medic enforced rest with the tyrannical efficiency of a woman who had once physically restrained a grown wolf from leaving the sickbed by sitting on his chest. The real reason was harder to name. Alara was learning things, not sword things, she knew those, not survival things, she'd always known those. She was learning what it felt like to exist in a place where her worth was not measured by her usefulness to a crown. In the Kelrith camp, people worked, ate, trained, argued, laughed, and lived with the robust efficiency of a community that had been self-sufficient for generations. There was no council watching from a raised dais. There were no nobles whispering behind silk fans. There were people, some of them wolves, some of them not, and they measured each other by what they contributed, not by what bloodline they carried. Brennan followed her around like a cheerful shadow, asking endless questions about sword technique and occasionally tripping over his own feet. He brought her breakfast on the mornings when the backlash was worst, not because she asked, but because he'd noticed she didn't eat on those mornings, and he had the straightforward compassion of a person who didn't complicate kindness. You remind me of my sister, he told her one morning, setting a tray of porridge on the table with a clatter. She's stubborn too, won't eat unless someone puts food directly in front of her and stares until she picks up the spoon. I don't need a nursemaid. Good, because I'm terrible at it. I burned the porridge. He paused. Twice. The porridge was indeed burned. Alara ate it anyway, because Brennan's face was so earnestly hopeful that refusing would have been like kicking a puppy. Cordelia, meanwhile, was undergoing her own transformation. Without her father's expectations, without the council's demands, without the need to perform the role of perfect Luna candidate, she turned out to be sharp, observant, and possessed of a caustic wit that could strip paint. I spent 12 years learning to play the harp, Cordelia told Alara one evening, sitting by the fire in the upper hall with a cup of cider and an expression of dawning outrage. 12 years? Do you know how useless harp is? In what conceivable scenario will my ability to play a delicate rendition of Moonlight Serenade be strategically relevant? Never, Alara said. Never. 12 years. Cordelia drank her cider with the aggressive urgency of a woman who had just realized how much of her life she'd wasted. Do you know what else they taught me? Flower arrangement, calligraphy, how to enter a room so that every man notices you, how to laugh at jokes that aren't funny, how to eat a meal without actually eating because Luna candidates must maintain a certain silhouette. She set down her cup. I'm learning to ride. Properly. Brennan's teaching me. Brennan can barely stay on a horse himself. I know, that's why he's perfect. He falls off so often that my mistakes look competent by comparison. She paused. He's very kind, for a border wolf. He is. Cordelia looked at the fire. The light softened the sharp edges of her beauty, and for a moment she looked less like a noblewoman and more like a girl who had never been given permission to just sit. "I was wrong about you," she said. "At the parade, and before that, I told myself you were beneath me because you didn't have a wolf. But the truth is, I was beneath you because I had everything: rank, beauty, a wolf, and I still couldn't do a single thing without someone's permission." Alara was quiet for a moment. "You're doing things now." "I'm sitting by a fire drinking cider in an enemy camp because I threw a council badge into the snow on impulse." Cordelia laughed, a real laugh, sharp and bright and nothing like crystal chimes. "My father would have a stroke." "That's a bonus." Cordelia laughed again, harder, and this time Alara's mouth twitched too, and for just a moment, the two women who had been positioned as rivals by a system that benefited from their hatred sat in firelight and were simply human. Chapter 11. Closer. The resonance between Alara and Ronan grew stronger. She felt it like a low hum beneath her skin, not the gold thread compulsion of a fated bond, not the chain-link weight of a forced pairing, but something else entirely. Something that breathed, something that gave space. When she was near Ronan, the broken bond pain in her chest eased. When she walked away, it returned. Not because he was binding her, she tested this carefully, suspicious of anything that felt like a leash, but because his presence seemed to soothe whatever ancient thing was stirring in her blood. She resented it at first. She had just freed herself from one bond. She had no interest in another. "You're keeping your distance," Ronan said one evening, finding her on the parapet where she went to watch the stars. He stood 3 feet away, always 3 feet, always leaving space, always treating her autonomy like the precious thing it was. "I'm being careful." "With what?" "With whatever this is." She gestured between them. "The resonance, the pain easing, your wolf going calm. I don't want another chain." He was quiet for a moment. The stars were sharp and cold above them, and the wind carried the scent of pine. "What if it's not a chain?" "Everything that binds you to another person is a chain. A bridge binds 2 sides of a river. That's not a chain, it's a choice." He paused. "The old bond, the fated bond with your prince, was assigned, built into your blood without your consent. This," he touched the air between them, not touching her, just indicating the space. "This feels different, not because it's fated, because it's chosen." She looked at him. The moonlight turned his dark hair silver at the edges and lit his frost-pale eyes until they looked like pieces of the sky. "You're very articulate for a border lord." "I read a lot. There's not much else to do in the Grey March during winter besides read and argue with horses." "Your horse argues with you?" "My horse is passive-aggressive. He gives me disapproving looks when I stay up too late. He has a specific sigh for when he thinks my decisions are suboptimal." He paused. "He's been sighing less since you arrived, which I choose to interpret as approval." She turned to face him. They were closer than 3 feet now. Somehow, in the course of the conversation, the distance had halved. She could see the individual shades of gray and blue in his eyes, the faint scar on his left cheekbone, the way his mouth curved slightly at one corner when he was trying not to smile. "The resonance," she said. "When we touch, what does it feel like to you?" His expression shifted. The composure thinned, and underneath was something raw and real and carefully guarded. "It feels like silence," he said. "My wolf has never been silent. It's always pushing, always hunting, always restless. But when you're near," he stopped himself, looked away, looked back. "It feels like home. And I've been trying very hard not to say that, because it's the kind of thing that makes a woman who just escaped one bond run for the mountains." "I'm not running." "I noticed." His voice was very quiet. "I noticed everything about you. It's becoming a problem." The wind blew. Her hair streamed sideways, golden in the moonlight, and a strand caught against his shoulder. He didn't brush it away. She didn't pull it back. "You notice everything," she repeated. "The way you check your horse before yourself, every single time. The way you train left-handed with the focus of someone building a house one brick at a time. The way you pretend you're fine on the mornings when the backlash is worst, but your left hand shakes when you hold your cup. He paused. The way you looked at me in the moonlit pass when I knelt, and you expected anger, and you got excellent taste, she finished. I stand by that. He was close. Too close. She could feel the warmth of him. Not body heat, but the resonance, that deep hum that eased the pain and made the broken place in her chest feel less like a wound and more like a door opening. She placed her hand on his chest, not pushing, not pulling, just touching. His heartbeat was fast beneath her palm, faster than his composure suggested, and his breath caught, and his eyes darkened, and she felt the resonance surge between them like a tide. I don't trust this, she said. I know. I might never fully trust it. I know that too. And I need you to understand that if this becomes a cage, I will walk out of it and I won't look back. Not for a bond, not for a crown, not for a man with excellent taste. He covered her hand with his. His palm was warm and calloused and certain. If it becomes a cage, I'll open the door myself. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she pulled her hand back, stepped away, and walked to the stairs. Alara. She stopped. You said you only faint in front of your own horse because it has better manners. He leaned against the parapet, and the moonlight made him look like something carved from the mountain itself. For the record, I'm working on my manners. She went downstairs. She did not smile, but the corner of her mouth twitched, and the hollow in her chest was, for the first time, warm. Chapter 12, The Sparing Lesson. Ronan asked to spar with her. Not to prove anything, he was clear about that. He wanted to understand how she fought because her style was unlike anything he'd seen, and he was, at heart, a student of combat. She agreed because she was going out of her mind with restless energy, and the alternative was pacing the parapet until she wore grooves in the stone. They met in the training yard at dawn. The yard was empty. Ronan had cleared it, which meant either he was being considerate or he didn't want witnesses. She suspected both. He fought beautifully. She'd expected that from his size and build, but the reality was striking. He moved like water and struck like stone, with a fluid efficiency that made every motion look effortless. His wolf was closer to the surface during combat, giving his movements an animal precision, but he never lost control, never overcommitted, never wasted a strike. She was better. Not stronger. He had 50 pounds on her and the wolf's speed besides, but she was faster in the ways that mattered. Faster to read his patterns, faster to adapt, faster to exploit the half-second gaps that every fighter left when they transitioned between forms. She'd spent 10 years compensating for the lack of a wolf, and the result was a fighting style that treated every disadvantage as a fulcrum. Ronan's sword caught hers in a bind. They were close, faces a foot apart, blades locked, breath steaming between them. His pale eyes held hers with an intensity that had nothing to do with combat. "You're holding back," she said. "I don't want to hurt your wrist." "My wrist is fine." She twisted out of the bind, swept his leading foot, and put him off balance. He recovered, barely, with a wolf's reflex. "Stop protecting me." Something shifted in his expression. The restraint dropped. Not completely. He was still careful, still controlled, but the next exchange was real. Fast, dangerous. Their blades sang in the cold air, and the sound of steel on steel rang off the stone walls. And for 3 glorious minutes they were perfectly matched. Not as wolf and human, not as lord and knight, but as equals. He disarmed her. A clever maneuver that used her healing wrist against her. Not roughly, just precisely, turning the weak point into a lever. Her sword flew from her hand and buried itself in the snow 3 feet away. She didn't reach for it. She stepped inside his guard, caught his sword arm, turned her hip, and threw him. The Lord of the Kelrith Wolves landed flat on his back in the snow with a thud that echoed off the mountain walls. His sword clattered away. His breath left him in a visible cloud. He lay there, blinking up at the sky, and Alara stood over him with her knee on his chest and her forearm across his throat. "Yield," she said. He looked up at her, snow in his dark hair, frost on his eyelashes, those impossible eyes wide and bright and burning with something that was definitely not defeat. "You just threw an alpha twice your weight," he said. His voice was slightly strangled, possibly because of the forearm on his throat, possibly for other reasons. "Without a wolf form." "Yield," she repeated. "If I yield, will you remove the arm from my windpipe?" "That depends on whether you plan to make some smug comment about how you let me win." "I was planning to make a smug comment about how the view from down here is exceptional, but I'm open to negotiations." Heat climbed her neck. She removed her arm, stood, and offered him a hand up. He took it. His fingers closed around hers, and the resonance hummed between them, warm and liquid and undeniable. And he stood, and they were very close, and his hand didn't let go of hers immediately. "For someone who claims to be working on his manners," she said, "that was remarkably rude." "I said I was working on them. I didn't say I was finished." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. A small motion, barely perceptible, except that it sent a shiver through her entire body that had nothing to do with cold. His eyes tracked the shiver with the acute attention of a man who was cataloging every reaction and storing them for later. "Again?" he asked, still holding her hand. "Are you asking for another round, or are you asking to hold my hand longer?" "I was asking about the sparring." He paused, the corner of his mouth lifted. "But I wouldn't say no to the other." She pulled her hand free. "Again. And this time, don't let me win." "You didn't win," he said, picking up his sword. "You destroyed me. There's a difference." They sparred until mid-morning. By the end, she'd thrown him 3 more times, he'd disarmed her twice, and Brennan had appeared on the upper walkway with a cup of tea and the expression of a man watching the greatest entertainment of his life. "Don't say a word," Ronan told him as they left the yard. "I wasn't going to say anything, my lord." "Your face is saying things." "My face is just my face, my lord. I can't help my face." Ronan looked at Alara. "Can I throw him off the parapet?" "He's too cheerful. The fall wouldn't hurt him." Brennan beamed. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week." Chapter 13. The Hunters Return. The council sent hunters on the 22nd day. Not the ceremonial guard that had accompanied Cordelia, these were real hunters. Moon Guard, the council's enforcers. 7 wolves in black armor who answered only to the elders and who carried silver chains designed for restraining bloodline anomalies. They came at night because the council had always preferred to do its cruelest work in the dark. Alara heard them first. The broken bond had, unexpectedly, sharpened her senses, not to wolf levels, but beyond human, as if the torn open place in her chest was compensating by reaching out in other directions. She heard the paws on stone, the creak of leather, the whispered commands. She was in the stable, checking Noctis's foreleg, still slightly warm, still favoring it the stubborn animal, when the first howl split the darkness. Noctis's head shot up. His ears went flat. He began to stamp, and she grabbed his halter and pressed her forehead to his nose. "Quiet. Listen." More howls. Answering calls. The camp sentries sounding the alarm. A deep, rhythmic horn blast that rolled across the mountain pass and echoed back. Ronan appeared in the stable doorway. He was fully armed, sword drawn, face carved from ice. The Moon Guard. 7, approaching from the south ridge. "Silver chains?" "Yes." His eyes met hers. "They're not here for a polite conversation." She reached for her sword. Ronan caught her hand. "Your wrist." "Is fine." She looked at him. "Don't you start." His jaw tightened. Something warred in his expression. The urge to protect versus the knowledge that she would not accept protection she hadn't requested. The latter won. "Fine," he said, "but you fight beside me, not in front of me." "Deal." They moved through the camp together. Ronan's soldiers were already in position, The Kael'rith border wolves knew how to defend their home, and they'd done it many times. The Moon Guard was outnumbered. But the Moon Guard didn't need numbers. They had silver chains, council authority, and the absolute conviction of men who believed they were doing righteous work. The fight was brief and brutal. The Moon Guard hit the North Gate in a tight formation. 3 shifted wolves in front, 4 in human form behind with silver chains and restraining poles. They moved like a machine, coordinated and relentless. Alara met them at the gate. She fought left-handed because the right wrist was healed enough for grip but not for heavy strikes. It didn't matter. She fought the way she always fought, faster, smarter, more precise than any wolf expected. She ducked under the first chain, kicked the pole from the second hunter's hands, disarmed the third with a sword technique that Brennan would later describe to anyone who'd listen as the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and I've seen the northern lights. Ronan fought beside her, not in front. Beside. Their styles meshed, her speed and precision complementing his power and wolf reflexes, and the Moon Guard faltered, then broke. One of them, the leader, a scarred wolf named Gregor, shifted back to human form and drew a silver-edged sword. He faced Alara. "The Council commands your surrender," he said. "The Council can command the wind to stop blowing. That doesn't mean it listens." Gregor charged. He was good, trained, experienced, strong. She let him come, sidestepped at the last moment, and drove her knee into his midsection. The air left him in a whoosh. She twisted, caught his sword arm, and used his own momentum to slam him face first into the snow. She picked up his silver sword and pressed it against the back of his neck. Not cutting, just holding. "Tell the Council this," she said, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "I am not their prisoner. I am not their subject. I am not their bloodline experiment. If they want me, they can come themselves, not send dogs." Gregor's face, pressed into the snow, managed an expression of deep indignation. She removed the sword and stepped back. Gregor scrambled up, snow covering his entire front, his dignity in shreds, and limped back to his remaining hunters. They retreated. It was, by all accounts, the fastest retreat in Moon Guard history. Brennan appeared beside Alara, breathless and grinning. "That was... don't. Incredible." "I said don't. You face-planted a Moon Guard captain into a snowbank. He's going to have to explain that to the Council. Do you think they'll include face-planted into snowbank by woman with no wolf in the official report?" Ronan, wiping snow and blood from his sword, said, "I'll write a witness statement if it helps." Despite herself, Alara laughed. It was a real laugh, short, sharp, surprised out of her, and both Ronan and Brennan stared at her as if she'd just performed a miracle. "She laughed," Brennan whispered. "I heard," Ronan said. "She actually laughed." Brennan. "This is the greatest day of my life." "Go check the perimeter, Brennan." "Right, yes, perimeter, going now." He backed away, pointing at Alara. "But for the record, great laugh." Alara sheathed her sword and looked at Ronan. He was watching her with an expression she was learning to recognize, the one where his composure was intact, but his eyes were doing something entirely different. Something warm, something hungry, something he was very carefully not acting on. "You fight well together," Brennan called from the perimeter because he had not actually left. "Just an observation, not implying anything." "Perimeter, Brennan." "Going." Chapter 14. The Night Watch. The camp didn't sleep after the Moon Guard attack. Sentries doubled. Fires burned higher. Ronan's wolves patrolled in rotating shifts, their eyes catching the firelight and amber flashes as they circled the walls. The mountain wind carried the smell of pine and cold iron and the distant, fading scent of the retreating hunters. Alara stood on the upper parapet, watching the south ridge. The moon was waning, a thin silver curve behind drifting clouds, and the darkness beyond the walls was absolute. Somewhere out there, the Moon Guard was licking its wounds and composing a report that would make the Council furious enough to escalate. She knew what escalation meant. Not more hunters, a formal declaration, a public judgment. the full weight of the Elder Council brought to bear against a single woman who had dared to exist outside their control. The broken bond throbbed in her chest, distant, dulled, but persistent, a reminder that Aldrich was out there too, his wolf still searching the void where she used to be. She could feel his guilt like weather, a pressure system that never quite broke into rain. "You should sleep." Ronan's voice. He'd appeared on the parapet with the silent efficiency of a man who moved through his own fortress like a ghost. He carried 2 cups of something that steamed, and when he handed her one, the smell was warm cider laced with honey. "Can't sleep. The backlash is worse after combat. The adrenaline agitates the remnant." He leaned against the parapet beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "I've read accounts of wolves who survived partial bond severance. The pain spikes correlate with emotional intensity. Combat, fear, anger, anything that raises the blood." She sipped the cider. It was excellent, sweet and sharp and warm all the way down. "Is there anything you haven't read?" "Romance poetry. I find it insufferable." "Really?" "All that languishing, all that pining from a distance." He paused. "If you want someone, you should say so, clearly, with proper sentence structure." She looked at him sideways. "Is that what you do?" The silence that followed was a fraction too long. His eyes were fixed on the mountains, but the muscle in his jaw had tightened, and his hand on the parapet was very, very still. "I'm working on it," he said. She turned to face him. The cider was warm in her hands, and the wind was cold on her neck, and the resonance between them was a constant, low vibration that she'd stopped trying to ignore. "Ronan." He looked at her. In the low light of the parapet torches, his face was all angles and shadows, and his pale eyes held a depth of feeling he would probably have denied under oath. "Why haven't you asked me about the moon wolf?" "You'll tell me when you're ready." "You're the only person who hasn't demanded an explanation." "I'm the only person who understands that your power doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to the council. It doesn't belong to anyone who wants to own it or study it or use it as leverage." He set his cup on the parapet. "It's yours. You'll understand it in your own time. My opinion on the matter is irrelevant." "It's not irrelevant." He looked at her sharply. Something broke through the composure, a flash of vulnerability, quickly masked but unmistakable. He hadn't expected her to say that. "It's not irrelevant," she repeated, "because you're the only person whose wolf has responded to whatever I am without anger or fear. You knelt in the pass, and you looked up at me, and you made a joke. Anyone else would have..." "Anyone else would have what? Been afraid?" He turned to face her fully. "I'm not afraid of you, Alara. I'm afraid for you. There's a significant difference." "Afraid for me." "The council won't stop. They'll declare you a heretic. They'll force a public judgment. And they'll use every tool they have, political, physical, spiritual, to bring you to heel, because you represent the one thing the council cannot survive." He paused. "Accountability." The wind gusted. Her hair caught in the torchlight, streaming gold, and a strand blew across his chest. He caught it, gently, between 2 fingers, the way you'd catch a thread of spider silk. "You have golden hair," he said, as if noticing for the first time, which was ridiculous because he noticed everything. "On the battlefield, in the moonlight, it looks like it's on fire." "That's not a strategic observation." "No." He released the strand. His fingers brushed her jaw as he did, a ghost of contact, barely there, electric. "It's not." She didn't move away. The resonance surged between them, warm and deep, and the broken place in her chest hummed not with pain, but with something that felt dangerously like anticipation. "You said if this became a cage, you'd open the door yourself," she said. "I meant it. And if I said I wanted the door to stay open, not locked, not latched, just open, and I wanted to stay anyway, not because of a bond, not because of a resonance, because I choose to?" His composure shattered. Not dramatically, Ronan didn't do dramatic, but the mask dropped, and underneath was a man who was looking at her with such raw, undisguised want that her breath caught. Then I would say, he said very quietly, that I've been hoping you'd say that since the night in the snowfield when you told me your horse had better manners. She stepped closer. He didn't step back. They were inches apart, and the cold air between them was the only barrier left, and his hand rose and settled on her waist, not pulling, not claiming, just resting there, warm through the fabric of her shirt, as if to say, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere, and I will let you decide what happens next. Just so we're clear, she said, I'm not going to be anyone's Luna. I don't want a Luna, I want a partner. His thumb traced a slow circle against her hip. Someone who'll throw me into snowbanks when I deserve it. That's a very specific requirement. I'm a very specific man. She placed her hand on his chest. His heart was hammering. She could feel it through the wool, rapid and hard, betraying everything his face was trying to hide. She left her hand there. He covered it with his own. They stood like that for a long time, on a parapet above a fortress in the mountains, with the wind and the stars and the sound of wolves patrolling in the dark. Not kissing, not needing to. Just existing in the same space, breathing the same air, choosing to be where they were. From the stable below, Noctis let out a single, deafening snort that echoed off every stone wall in the camp. Ronan closed his eyes. Does he have a sixth sense for moments like this? He has a sixth sense for ruining things. It's his primary talent. I thought his primary talent was biting. He's multi-talented. They separated, not because either of them wanted to. She could see that in the reluctance of his hand leaving her waist, in the way his eyes lingered on her mouth for exactly 1 second before he looked away. But because the parapet was not private, and the camp was full of soldiers, and Brennan was somewhere nearby, and Brennan would absolutely tell everyone. Good night, Alara. Good night, Ronan. She walked to the stairs, stopped, turned. For the record, she said, your manners are improving. He smiled. A real smile. Not the half-smirk, not the sardonic quirk, but a full, genuine smile that transformed his face from dangerously handsome into something so beautiful it almost hurt to look at. Give me time, he said. I'll ruin that impression soon enough. Chapter 15. The Declaration. The council's declaration arrived by Raven on the 28th day. It was written on white vellum, stamped with every elder's seal, and phrased in the formal, bloodless language of men who had perfected the art of making cruelty sound administrative. By decree of the Elder Council of Arventhor, the woman known as Alara Voss is hereby declared a dangerous heretic and threat to the stability of the werewolf bloodlines. She is ordered to present herself for formal verification and judgment at the eclipse square of Arventhor on the day of the next lunar eclipse, 30 days hence. Failure to appear will result in her classification as a rogue element and the authorization of lethal force for her retrieval. Furthermore, let it be known, the woman's claim to any fated mate bond with the Crown Prince is declared fraudulent, her service record is stricken from the Royal Guard's annals, and her name is removed from all honorable registers of the kingdom. She is nothing, let her prove otherwise. Ronan read the declaration aloud to Alara, Cordelia, Brennan, and Helwyn in the upper hall. When he finished, the silence was thick enough to cut. Well, Cordelia said, that's dramatic. Brennan looked like he wanted to set the vellum on fire. Helwyn looked like she wanted to prescribe the entire council a strong laxative. Ronan's face was carved from stone. Alara took the vellum. She read it again. The words blurred and refocused. She is nothing. She set the vellum on the table. I'm going. Ronan's head snapped toward her. Alara, I'm going back to the eclipse square on the day they've set. That's exactly what they want. They want you on their ground, surrounded by their people, under their control. I know. Then why? Because if I don't go, they'll send more hunters. They'll attack this camp. They'll use me as an excuse to declare war on the Kilrith territory, and your people will pay the price for sheltering me. She met his eyes. I won't hide behind your walls while your people die for my existence. Ronan's jaw tightened until the muscle stood out like iron. She could see the war inside him. The strategist versus the man, the lord versus the wolf, the desire to lock the gates and keep her safe versus the knowledge that she would never forgive him if he tried. "Then I'll come with you," he said. "No." "Yes. This is my fight, not yours. It became my fight when my wolf knelt to you in the moonlit pass." His voice was quiet but absolute. "I'm not fighting this battle for you. I'm riding beside you. There's a difference." She opened her mouth to argue. He held up a hand. "Not in front of you, not making decisions for you. 3 steps behind, close enough to help if you ask. Far enough to show that this is your judgment, not mine." He paused. "I will not be Aldrich, but I will not pretend that what's happening between us doesn't give me the right to stand at your back." Cordelia looked between them. "I'm coming too." Everyone turned. "The council used me as a weapon against her," Cordelia said. Her voice was steady, the steadiest Alara had ever heard it. "They sent me to deliver their decree. They dressed me up in blue velvet and put their words in my mouth. I want to stand in their square and let them see what I chose to become instead." Brennan raised his hand. "I'm also coming, for moral support. And because I've never seen the Eclipse Square and I think it sounds exciting." "It's a judgment ground," Ronan said. "People have been executed there." "Less exciting," Brennan conceded, "but I'm still coming." Helwyn packed a medical kit and said nothing, which was her way of saying she was coming too, and anyone who argued would be given a detailed lecture on the consequences of ignoring medical advice. Chapter 16. The Road Back. They left the Grey Mark on a morning of gray sky and blowing snow. The party was small by design. Ronan, Alara, Cordelia, Brennan, Helwyn, and a dozen Kelrith soldiers. Not an army, a statement. They rode under no banner, carried no declaration, and made no attempt at secrecy. They were not sneaking into Arventhor. They were walking through the front door. Alara rode at the head of the column. Noctis was in high spirits, or at least his version of high spirits, which meant he bit only the air instead of actual people, and maintained a pace that suggested he was condescending to carry her rather than being directed. His foreleg was healed, Marin's poultice and Helwyn's treatment having done their work, and he moved with the powerful, fluid stride of a warhorse who knew exactly how impressive he looked. Ronan rode 3 steps behind her. Exactly 3. She'd told him he didn't need to be so literal about it, and he'd told her he was a man of his word, and she'd told him he was insufferable, and he'd told her he'd been told. Cordelia rode a borrowed Kelrith horse, a sturdy bay mare with none of the temperament of Noctis and all of the patience, which was exactly what a novice rider needed. She sat the horse with the rigid posture of a woman who had learned to ride from a book. But she didn't fall off, and after the first hour, she actually began to relax. "This isn't terrible," Cordelia announced, as if surprised. "Wait until we go uphill," Brennan said cheerfully. "What happens uphill?" "You'll find out." He grinned at her. She glared at him. The glare had significantly less venom than her glares of 3 weeks ago, which Brennan appeared to notice and which made him grin wider. They rode for 2 days through the mountain passes, camping at waypoints and riding through daylight. The backlash pain came every morning, but it was dulled now, whether by the distance from Aldrich or by the proximity to Ronan. Alara couldn't tell. She suspected both. On the second night, Ronan found her by the campfire, staring into the flames. "You're thinking about what happens if the moon wolf doesn't awaken." She didn't deny it. "The mark has only appeared twice, both times by accident, both times with you." She looked at him. "What if it needs you? What if I can't do this alone?" "You won't be alone." "That's not what I'm asking." He sat beside her. The firelight carved his features into amber and shadow, and his pale eyes were warm in a way that made the cold feel irrelevant. "The moon wolf doesn't need me," he said. "It responded to me because my wolf recognized it. But the power is yours. It's been yours since birth, sealed, suppressed, hidden by whatever mechanism the council didn't want activated. You don't need a trigger. You need to stop being afraid of what you are." "I'm not afraid." "You're terrified, and that's reasonable. You've spent your entire life being told you're less because you don't have a wolf, and now you're discovering that you might be more than any wolf who's ever lived. That's not a comfortable realization. She was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the dark, Noctis was harassing a bush. "What if the council is right?" she said. "What if this power is dangerous? What if I am a heretic?" "The council calls anything dangerous that threatens their control. Heretic is just their word for someone who refuses to obey." He paused. "You've been refusing to obey your entire life. This is just the first time they've noticed." She looked at the fire. The flames reflected in her eyes, gold and orange and hot, and the mark on her collarbone, invisible in the firelight, hummed beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. "Thank you," she said, "for not making this about you. It's not about me. Most men would make it about them. Most men are idiots." He caught her eye and held it. "I'm only occasionally an idiot, and never about things that matter." The fire popped. Sparks rose into the black sky. Alara leaned sideways, not dramatically, not consciously, just a slight shift in weight until her shoulder rested against his. He went very still. Then, slowly, he leaned back, matching her pressure, and they sat like that, shoulder to shoulder, watching the fire, saying nothing. From the darkness, Brennan's whisper, "Are they?" Helwyn's whisper, sharper, "Go to sleep, Brennan." "But they're..." Sleep. Chapter 17. The Gates of Arventhor. They saw the royal city at dawn on the third day. Arventhor rose from the plateau like a crown of stone. High walls, gleaming towers, the great drawbridge spanning the Frostclaw Gorge. The banner of the wolf rampant flew from every tower, black and gold against the gray sky, and even from a distance, Alara could see the movement on the walls. Soldiers, sentries, the rigid choreography of a city preparing for judgment. She stopped on the ridge. Noctis halted without being told, his ears pricked forward, his massive body tense with the alertness of an animal who recognized home and wasn't sure he liked it. Behind her, Ronan drew his horse alongside. Not ahead, alongside. "There's still time to change the plan," he said. "There's no plan. I'm riding in, standing in their square, and letting them try to force me to my knees." "That is a plan. It's just a terrible one." "Do you have a better one?" "Several. All of them involve significantly fewer scenarios in which you might die." "I'm not going to die." "You don't know that." "I know I'm not going to kneel." He looked at her. His jaw was set, his eyes were fierce, and beneath the composure she could see the effort it was costing him to stay 3 steps behind, instead of riding ahead and solving this with steel. "I hate this," he said, "for the record." "Noted. If they touch you, then I'll handle it. If they chain you, then I'll break the chains. And if you can't?" She met his gaze. "Then you'll know, because I'll ask for help. And I've never asked anyone for help in my life, so if I'm asking, it means I need it." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded, a single, curt motion, the nod of a man accepting terms he didn't like but respected. "3 steps behind," he said. 3 steps behind. They rode toward the gate. The drawbridge was lowered, the gates were open, and the eclipse square was full. It stretched before the main gate of Arventhor, a vast circular plaza of dark stone, ringed by torches and flanked by the carved wolf statues that had watched the city's judgments for 1,000 years. The square was designed for exactly this: public ceremony, public justice, public spectacle. The seats rose in tiers around the central platform, and every tier was packed. Nobles in their furs and jewels, soldiers in their armor, common folk in their woolens and cloaks crowded into the upper galleries, craning for a view. The council of elders on their raised dais, 7 ancient wolves in silver-trimmed black, their faces set in identical expressions of judicial displeasure. Aldrich, standing at the foot of the dais in the black and gold of the crown, looking like a man attending his own funeral. And above it all, the sky. The lunar eclipse had begun, the moon sliding into the earth's shadow, its light dimming from silver to copper to a deep, bloody red that stained the snow and the stone and the watching faces. Alara rode into the square on Noctis. The crowd went silent. Not the respectful silence of a ceremony, the stunned silence of people who had been told the heretic would come in chains and were confronted instead with a woman on a black warhorse, riding with the unhurried confidence of someone who owned the ground beneath her. She was not in armor. She wore a fitted dark tunic over riding trousers, her sword at her hip, her golden hair unbound and falling past her waist. No badge, no crest, no symbol of allegiance. She rode under no banner, and the absence was louder than any flag. Noctis walked through the square with his head high, his hooves striking the stone in a measured cadence that echoed off the walls like a war drum. He was, in his entire bearing, magnificent, black as midnight, gleaming with health, radiating the particular menace of an animal who was barely tolerating the existence of everyone present. Ronan entered the square behind her. 3 steps. His Kael'rith soldiers followed at a distance, not threatening, not retreating, present. Cordelia rode beside Brennan, her chin raised, her borrowed cloak replacing the blue velvet, her face pale but set. Elder Hargrave stood. The torchlight cast long shadows from his silver robes, and his voice carried the dry, precise cruelty of a man who had been pronouncing judgment for 50 years. Alara Voss, you stand before the Council of Elders to answer for the irregularity of your bloodline, the fraudulent claim of a fated mate bond with the Crown Prince, and the crime of heresy against the ancient laws of the werewolf bloodlines. Alara dismounted. Noctis immediately positioned himself behind her, a wall of black horse between her and the crowd, and she placed one hand on his neck, not for support, but for contact, for the reminder that she was not alone. I stand here, she said, because you threatened to send an army if I didn't. Let's not pretend this is voluntary. Murmurs from the crowd. Hargrave's mouth thinned. You are charged with possessing an abnormal bloodline that threatens the stability of the werewolf hierarchy. You are charged with impersonating a fated mate of the Crown Prince despite lacking a wolf form. You are charged with forcibly severing a sacred bond, an act of heresy against the Moon's covenant. I severed a bond that was being used to control me, Alara said. Her voice was clear and carried to every corner of the square. I left a position where I was publicly humiliated by the man who was supposed to stand beside me. I refused to return when your hunters came to drag me back in chains. If those are crimes, then yes, I'm guilty. But the only law I broke was the one that says a woman must endure anything a man decides to do to her, and I don't recognize that law. The murmurs grew louder. In the common galleries, she saw faces shift. Recognition, sympathy, the expressions of women who had endured their own versions of public humiliation and had never been allowed to speak. Elder Hargrave raised his hand for silence. The council does not recognize your authority to interpret law. You are wolfless, you are bondless, you are nothing. Then why are you afraid of me? Silence. Absolute. The question hung in the air like a blade. Hargrave's composure cracked, just a hairline fracture quickly sealed. The council fears nothing. The council protects the bloodline purity of our people and your existence. My existence terrifies you, Alara said, because you've spent 1,000 years telling wolves that power comes from form, from shifting, from the physical manifestation of the beast. And I walked into your court without a wolf and became the strongest knight you'd ever seen. I fought your battles. I protected your prince. I won your tournaments. I did everything a wolf could do, and I did it without one, and that made me dangerous. Not because I'm a heretic, but because I'm proof that your entire system is built on a lie. The crowd stirred. The nobles shifted uncomfortably. The soldiers, some of whom had fought beside her, some of whom she'd saved, looked at the ground, at the sky, anywhere but at the council. Aldrich stepped forward. She's right. Every head turned. Aldrich Veyron, Crown Prince of Arventhor, walked to the center of the square. He was beautiful still, golden and sharp and carved from duty, but the beauty had been hollowed out. His eyes were dark-ringed, his jaw was clenched. He moved like a man who had been carrying a weight too heavy for his bones and had finally decided to set it down, even if it killed him. "She's right about all of it," he said. "She is my fated mate. The bond was real. I rejected her publicly because the council threatened to imprison her if I acknowledged the bond. They told me her bloodline was dangerous. They told me she would be locked in the moon tower. I chose to humiliate her instead because I believed." His voice broke. He stopped, breathed, continued. "Because I believed that was protection. Because I was too much of a coward to tell her the truth and let her choose for herself." Hargrave's face was white with fury. "Your Highness, this is highly—" "I'm not finished." Aldrich turned to face the council. "You used me. You used my fear for her. You told me the only way to keep her safe was to make her worthless in the eyes of the court. And I did it, because I was raised to believe the council's word was law. But it wasn't law, it was manipulation. And the woman I destroyed to obey you is standing in this square right now, stronger than any of us, and she didn't need my protection. She never did." He turned to Alara. His golden eyes met hers across the width of the square, and in them was a grief so deep it had its own gravity. "I acknowledge you," he said, "publicly, before the council, before the court, before every person who heard me deny you. You are Alara Voss, and you were my fated mate, and I was not worthy of you." The words landed in the square like stones dropped in still water. Alara looked at him. This man she had loved, this man who had broken her, this man who was finally telling the truth, and felt the hollow in her chest ache with a pain that was not the bond's remnant, but something older and more human. "You acknowledge me," she said, "because you finally lost me, not because you finally saw me." Aldrich flinched. His eyes went bright, and he looked down, and the Crown Prince of Arventhor stood in the eclipse square in front of his entire kingdom and had no answer. Chapter 18. The Moon Wolf Rises. Elder Hargrave rose to his full height. "Enough," he said. "The Crown Prince's emotional outburst changes nothing. This woman is a bloodline anomaly. She is unverified. She is dangerous, and she will kneel before this council and submit to judgment." He raised his hand, and the 6 remaining elders rose with him, and the combined werewolf pressure of 7 ancient alphas descended on the square like a physical weight. It hit Alara like a wave. The pressure drove at her knees, her spine, the base of her skull, the primal compulsion that every wolf obeyed, the hierarchical force that said, "Bow, submit, kneel." She felt it in her bones. She felt it in the broken place where the bond had been. She felt it in every scar, every wound, every night she'd spent fighting for a kingdom that called her worthless. Her knees buckled. She caught herself, barely, one hand braced against Noctis's side. The pain in her chest erupted, and the phantom claws were back, tearing at her sternum, and the echo of Aldrich's wolf howled in her skull. The crowd watched, the nobles watched, the soldiers watched. They waited for her to fall. Noctis lowered his great head and pressed his nose against her shoulder. Not pushing her upright, just touching her, reminding him the warm, solid, stubborn presence of the first creature who had ever chosen her and who had never once asked her to kneel. She placed her hand on his neck. The eclipse reached totality. The moon went dark. Not dark, red, a deep blood red that turned the entire sky into something ancient and vast and alive. The red light fell across the square and the shadows shifted and the temperature dropped and every torch flickered. The mark on Alara's collarbone ignited. Not flickered, not glowed, ignited. Silver-white light erupted from beneath her skin, blazing like a brand, and it spread down her arms, across her hands, along the line of her jaw, until she was outlined in lunar fire, standing in the red dark of the eclipse like a beacon. She straightened. The pain didn't vanish, it transformed. The broken bond, the phantom claws, the hollow chest, they burned away like frost in sunlight, and in their place was something vast and ancient and absolutely certain. The moon wolf. Not a shift, not a physical transformation into fur and teeth and claws. This was older than shifting. This was the original power, the one that existed before forms, before packs, before hierarchies. The presence, the judgment, the authority that did not need a body because it was woven into the blood of every wolf who had ever lived. It radiated from her like heat from a forge. The soldiers felt it first. The common soldiers at the edges of the square, young wolves, old wolves, strong wolves, weak wolves, went to their knees, not in pain, not in humiliation, in recognition. Their wolves bowed to what their wolves had always known was above them. The nobles followed. One by one, tier by tier, the great houses of Arventhor dropped. Fur-trimmed cloaks puddled in the snow, jeweled circlets bent toward the ground. Hands that had never been dirty clutched at stone as their wolves compelled them downward. The Council of Elders. Hargrave fought it. She could see it in the rigid set of his body, the cord standing out in his neck, the fury on his face as he resisted the force that was pushing him down. He fought for 10 seconds. 20. His knees hit the stone, and he snarled, actually snarled, an animal sound of impotent rage, and his ancient, powerful wolf submitted to the thing that had created all wolves. One by one, the elders fell. Cordelia knelt. The tears came, not from humiliation, but from recognition. She looked up at Alara with streaming eyes and a face full of something that might have been relief. And then she reached up and tore the backup Luna badge from her cloak. She'd kept it, hidden, a talisman of the identity she'd been assigned, and threw it into the snow. "I was never your replacement," she whispered, "and she was never nothing." Brennan knelt, and he was grinning through it because Brennan grinned through everything, and even his wolf's submission couldn't suppress the sheer delight of watching the council eat dirt. Aldrich knelt last of the Arventhor wolves, not because he fought it, because the Moon Wolf's power moved through the hierarchy, and the Crown Prince was the highest-ranking wolf present. The force reached him like a tide, and his knees buckled, and he went down in the snow with a sound that might have been a sob. He looked up at Alara. The golden eyes that had once made her feel like the only warm thing in the kingdom were full of tears, and his mouth shaped a word. Her name, maybe, or an apology, or the acknowledgement he should have made months ago in the parade square, instead of calling her unworthy. It didn't matter now. It was too late, and they both knew it. Ronan knelt. He did it without resistance. His wolf went down willingly. She could see it in the ease of his motion, the way he lowered to one knee in the snow, with the unhurried grace of a man performing an act of conscious choice rather than compulsion. His pale eyes found hers. In them was no anger, no shame, no resentment. "I kneel to you," he said. His voice was clear and steady and carried across the square. "Not to a crown." The words hit her somewhere beneath the power, beneath the light, in the place that was still just Alara, the girl who had sat in a horse's stall with an apple, the woman who checked hooves before wounds, the knight who had thrown her badge in the snow and ridden away. She looked at the square. Every wolf was on their knees, every noble, every soldier, every elder. 1,000 years of hierarchy, bowing to a woman they'd called worthless. Beside her, Noctis stood. He did not kneel. His massive head was raised, his ears pricked forward, his black body solid and unmoved by the power radiating from the woman at his side. He was not a wolf. He owed no submission to the Moon Wolf's authority. He was a horse, her first companion, her chosen partner. And he stood beside her because he had always stood beside her, and no ancient power on earth would make him do otherwise. She placed her hand on his neck. The silver light from her skin danced across his black mane, and he leaned into her touch, and the eclipsed square of Arventhor was silent, except for the wind and the sound of 1,000 wolves breathing. Alara spoke. "The Council of Elders has ruled this kingdom through fear, control, and the suppression of any power that threatened their authority. They used fated mate bonds as political tools. They used bloodline verification as a weapon. They told women without wolves that they were broken, told women with wolves that their only value was breeding, and told every wolf in this kingdom that obedience was the same as loyalty." Her voice carried. Not loud, she didn't shout. The power carried it, the way the moon carries light. "I am not broken. I was never broken. I was the thing they were afraid of. Proof that power doesn't come from a form or a bond or a crown. It comes from a choice. The choice to stand when they tell you to kneel. The choice to leave when they tell you to stay. The choice to be more than what they decided you were. She looked at Hargrave. The elder's face was pressed close to the stone, his body rigid with forced submission, and his eyes, ancient, furious, afraid, met hers. The council's authority to judge bloodlines is dissolved, she said. As of this moment, no wolf will be imprisoned, executed, or stripped of rank for the nature of their blood. No woman will be assigned as a replacement Luna against her will. No fated mate bond will be used as a chain by royal power, family, or council. She paused. The silence was absolute. And if any elder disagrees, she smiled. It was not a kind smile. They're welcome to stand up and say so. No one stood. No one moved. The Council of Elders, for the first time in 1,000 years, had nothing to say. Chapter 19. After the Light. The power receded like a tide. The silver light dimmed. The mark on Alara's collarbone faded to a faint silver line. Still there, still present, but no longer blazing. The pressure on the square eased, and the wolves rose, slowly, unsteadily, like people waking from a shared dream. Alara swayed. The exhaustion hit her all at once. The power, the pain, the weeks of running and fighting and breaking and rebuilding, and the world tilted sideways. Noctis was there, solid and warm and smelling like hay and judgment, and she leaned against him and breathed. Ronan stood. He didn't rush to her, he knew better, but he moved within arm's reach and waited, his pale eyes tracking every flicker of fatigue on her face. "You're standing," he said. "Barely. Barely still counts," he paused. "That was, without question, the most terrifying and beautiful thing I have ever witnessed, and I once saw Brennan try to ride 2 horses at once." From across the square, Brennan's voice, "That was one time." Alara laughed. It was weak, exhausted, and slightly hysterical, but it was a laugh, and it broke the tension in the square like a stone thrown through glass. People started breathing. People started talking. The soldiers, some of whom were crying, which they would all deny later, looked at each other with the dazed expressions of men who had just watched the world change. Hargrave struggled to his feet. His silver robes were stained with snow and dirt, and his dignity was in approximately the same condition. He opened his mouth. "The council will not..." Alara didn't even look at him. She just raised one hand, palm out, and the faintest pulse of silver light flickered from her fingertips. Hargrave's mouth closed. He sat back down on the dais. He did not speak again for the remainder of the proceedings, which was, by universal agreement, a dramatic improvement. Aldrich approached her. He moved slowly, carefully, the way you'd approach a wild animal or a forest fire, and stopped 5 feet away. "Alara, I don't." Her voice was gentle, gentler than he deserved, and they both knew it. "You don't need to say anything else. You told the truth today. That mattered. It was late, and it was too late for us, but it mattered. Is there anything? You can go back to your throne. You can be a better king than the council made you. You can remember that the woman you called unworthy just dissolved the council's authority while standing next to a horse that has better political instincts than your entire court." She paused. "And you can stop sending hunters after people. It's not a good look." He nodded. His eyes were bright, and his jaw was working, and the Crown Prince of Arventhor looked, for the first time in his life, like a man instead of a title. "I loved you," he said. "That was real." "I know. I loved you too." She met his eyes. "But love isn't enough if the person holding it doesn't know how to let you hold it back." He closed his eyes, nodded once more, turned and walked back toward the dais where the remains of his council sat in stunned silence, and his crown waited on a throne that suddenly felt much too large for one person. He didn't look back. It was, Alara thought, the kindest thing he'd done. Cordelia found her in the stable an hour later. Alara was doing what she always did after a crisis, checking Noctis. Hooves, legs, mane, saddle straps, feed. The ritual, the anchor. The horse stood patiently, or impatiently, because Noctis did nothing patiently, while she ran her hands along his legs and checked the left foreleg that he'd finally stopped favoring. Cordelia stood in the stable doorway, her borrowed cloak wrapped tight around her shoulders, her auburn hair loose and windblown, her face clean of makeup for the first time since Alara had known her. She looked younger. She looked real. "What are you going to do now?" Cordelia asked. "I don't know." "That's terrifying." "Yes." Alara straightened and looked at her. "What are you going to do?" Cordelia was quiet for a moment. "Brennan offered to teach me sword basics. He said I have good instincts." She paused. "He also said I have a very threatening glare, which might be useful in combat." "He's not wrong about the glare. He's wrong about everything else, but he's not wrong about that." She hesitated. If you're going somewhere, can I come? Not forever. Just until I figure out what I am when I'm not being someone else's backup plan." Alara looked at the woman who had called her a hunting dog in front of a kingdom. The woman who had pinned the council badge to her cloak and delivered their decree. The woman who had torn that badge off and thrown it in the snow and wept in a judgment square because she finally understood that she too had been used. "You can come," Alara said. Cordelia's eyes filled. She blinked the tears away with the aggressive efficiency of someone who was done crying and intended to stay done. "Thank you." She paused. "And for the record, I meant what I said. About the hunting dog comment. I'm sorry." "I know. I was a terrible person." "You were a person in a cage. Terrible is what cages make people." Cordelia nodded. Then she looked at Noctis, who was regarding her with the suspicious expression of a horse who remembered everyone who had ever been unkind to his person. "Does he bite?" Cordelia asked. "He bites everyone." "Even you?" "Especially me." Cordelia edged closer. Noctis eyed her. She held out a hand, tentatively, the way you'd offer a truce to an enemy general. Noctis sniffed her fingers, considered. Then, with the elaborate disdain of an animal making an enormous concession, he allowed her to touch his nose. "He's softer than he looks," Cordelia said, surprised. "Don't tell him that. He has a reputation." Chapter 20. The Border Camp. Alara did not become anyone's queen. She considered it briefly in the days after the judgment. The old royal city would have taken her. The people who had watched her dissolve the council's authority would have followed her anywhere, and the throne was, in essence, hers for the asking. Every werewolf king owed submission to the moon wolf. She could have ruled. She chose not to. She chose the border. The place she'd always been strongest, the place where the walls were made of stone and mountain, not politics and silk. The place where the people who needed protection most, the wolfless, the abandoned, the heretical, the inconvenient, had always been pushed. She built her camp at the old watchtower on the Greymarch Pass, on the border between Arventhor and the Kelrith territory. It was neutral ground, hers by right of the Moon Wolf's authority, claimed by no kingdom and open to anyone. Brennan was the first to volunteer. He arrived with a bedroll, a training sword, and an optimism so relentless it was practically a weapon. "I've been reassigned," he announced, "by myself, to your service. Does Ronan know about this?" He said, and I quote, "If she'll have you, go. If she won't, come back and stop talking about her. So I'm very motivated to make a good impression." Helwyn came next with her medical supplies and her unshakable efficiency. Then a group of wolfless men and women from the outer villages, people who had been turned away from the royal city, denied entry to the packs, left to survive on the margins. They came to the border camp because they had heard that a wolfless woman had made the entire council kneel, and they wanted to stand somewhere they were allowed to exist. Cordelia stayed. She learned to ride properly, which took 3 weeks and resulted in 7 falls, 2 bruised ribs, and an increasingly colorful vocabulary that would have given her etiquette instructors heart failure. She learned basic sword work from Brennan, who was a terrible teacher but an excellent motivator, primarily because his own form was so bad that Cordelia was driven to improve just to avoid looking as ridiculous as he did. "You're supposed to be teaching me," Cordelia told him one morning, after he'd tripped over his own sword for the second time. "I'm teaching by example. This is what not to do." "That's not a method." "It's my method." "Your method is terrible." "And yet you're improving." He grinned at her, lopsided and earnest, and she looked away, but not before Alara saw the color rise in her cheeks. Ronan came to the border camp every week. He came on the pale gray horse, which Noctis had, by this point, accepted as an ally, or at least as a horse he wouldn't actively try to murder, and he brought supplies, information, reports from the Kelrith territory, and on one occasion a crate of books he'd collected from the ancient Kelrith library. "Light reading," he said, setting the crate on the table in Alara's quarters. She opened it. Inside were 12 leather-bound volumes, each one older than the city of Arventhor. They were histories, treatises, records of the Moon Wolf lineage, the documents his grandfather had preserved when the council tried to destroy them. "This is the most thoughtful gift anyone's ever given me," she said, running her hand over the aged leather. "It's not a gift, it's a loan. I expect them back in pristine condition." "Liar." "Absolutely." He leaned against the doorframe, watching her with that half-smile that lived permanently at the corner of his mouth whenever she was in the room. "But I wanted an excuse to visit, and I'm returning to retrieve my books sounds more dignified than I wanted to see you." She looked up at him. He was backlit by the afternoon sun, and his dark hair caught the light, and his frost-pale eyes were warm in a way that made the word frost seem wrong. "You don't need an excuse." "I know." He didn't move from the doorframe. "But I like having one. It gives me something to hold when I'm riding back and trying to convince my wolf that we don't need to turn around." "Your wolf wants to turn around?" "My wolf wants to stay, permanently, in your stable, eating your grain, being occasionally bitten by your horse." He paused. "My wolf has very low standards for accommodation." "Your wolf has excellent standards. You said so yourself." He pushed off the doorframe and crossed the room. She stood. They were close, closer than the usual 3 feet, closer than the parapet, closer than the firelight conversation on the mountain road. His hand rose and tucked a strand of golden hair behind her ear, and his fingers lingered at her jaw, and his thumb traced the line of her cheekbone with a tenderness so intense it was almost violent. "I am very carefully not saying the thing I want to say," he said. "What thing?" "The thing that involves proper sentence structure and clear communication and all the qualities I said I valued in romantic declarations." His voice was low, almost rough. "The thing that starts with the fact that I've thought about you every waking hour since the night in the snowfield and ends with the fact that my wolf has never, not once, not ever, responded to any living being the way it responds to you." Her hand found his chest. His heartbeat was wild beneath her palm. "I thought you didn't like romance poetry." "I don't. This isn't poetry. This is a tactical assessment of my emotional state, delivered with maximum precision." "It sounds like poetry." "Then I'm failing at tactical communication, which is embarrassing for both of us." She smiled. A real smile, wide and warm and unguarded, the kind she'd given no one in years, the kind that made Ronan's breath catch audibly. "Say the thing," she said. "I love you." No hesitation, no qualifiers. 3 words, clean as a sword edge, delivered with the steady gaze and sure voice of a man who meant every syllable and would stand behind them for the rest of his life. Not because of the Moon Wolf, not because of the resonance, not because of anything mystical or fated or assigned by blood. Because you fight like water. Because you check your horse's hooves before your own wounds. Because you threw a badge in the snow and walked away from everything, rather than be anything less than yourself. Because when you laughed, really laughed, in my camp, it was the best sound I'd ever heard, and I've been trying to make you do it again ever since. She was quiet for a moment, not because she was uncertain. She had been uncertain about many things in her life, But this was not one of them. She was quiet because she wanted to feel this. All of it. The warmth, the certainty, the steady hum of the resonance that was not a chain but a bridge, and the knowledge that the man standing in front of her would open every door rather than lock a single one. "I love you too," she said. "And that's terrifying, because the last time I loved someone, he stood in a square and called me unworthy. But you're not him, and this isn't the same. And I choose this, not because a bond told me to, not because a moon decided it, but because you caught me when I fell, and then you let go and let me stand." He kissed her forehead, not her mouth, her forehead. The gentlest possible point of contact, his lips warm against her skin, his hands framing her face, and the resonance sang between them like a bell. "For the record," he murmured against her hair, "I have never done this before." "Done what? Made a tactical assessment of your emotional state?" "Any of it." His voice was quiet. "None of this, not with anyone." She pulled back and looked at him. His composure was gone, fully, completely gone, and underneath was a man who was looking at her with such naked vulnerability that she understood, without him saying it, that she was the first person he'd let past the walls, the first person who'd made his wolf go silent, the first person he'd loved. She placed her hand over his heart. "Then we'll figure it out together." "I'd like that." "Good, because your horse is passive-aggressive and my horse bites people, and between the two of them, we're going to need a unified strategy." He laughed, a real laugh, surprised, warm, slightly helpless, and it transformed his face the way sunrise transforms a mountain. From the stable, Noctis let out a snort so loud it rattled the shutters. "He's going to be insufferable about this," Ilara said. "He's always insufferable." "Yes, but now he's going to be insufferable with purpose." Chapter 21. The Road Ahead. Spring came to the Grey March Pass like a slow exhale. The snow didn't vanish. This was the mountains, and the snow never fully vanished, but it softened, receding from the roads and the lower passes, revealing dark earth and the first stubborn shoots of green. The watchtower camp grew. More people came, wolfless women, abandoned men, former soldiers who'd left the Royal Guard, healers who'd been denied training, children who'd been born without wolf blood and told they were lesser. Ilara trained them. Not all of them became fighters. Some became healers, builders, scouts, cooks, craftspeople. But those who wanted to fight, she taught. Left-handed, right-handed, with swords, with staves, with nothing but their bodies and their will. She taught them the way she'd learned, by treating every disadvantage as a lever. Brennan became her second-in-command, which he accepted with the solemn gravity of a man who understood the responsibility and the cheerful enthusiasm of a puppy who'd just been given a bone. He was still a mediocre fighter, but he was a brilliant organizer, and the camp ran smoothly because he had the rare gift of making people want to work together without anyone feeling ordered. Cordelia took over the camp's records and communications. Her years of calligraphy and etiquette turned out to be, against all expectation, useful. She could draft formal correspondence that was so precisely polite it was devastating, and her knowledge of noble houses meant she could navigate political alliances with the ruthless efficiency of a woman who had spent her life studying power from the inside. "I spent 12 years learning to be decorative," she told Ilara one evening, reviewing a stack of supply agreements. "It turns out that if you point all that training at something useful, it's actually quite effective." "You were always effective," Ilara said. "You just weren't allowed to choose what to be effective at." Cordelia looked up from the papers. Her auburn hair was braided back now, a practical braid, not a decorative one, and her face had the healthy color of someone who spent time outside and ate regular meals without worrying about silhouettes. "Brennan asked me to ride with him to the lower pass tomorrow," she said. Her voice was elaborately casual. "Is that so?" "It's a routine supply run, purely practical." "Of course." "He's bringing lunch." "That's very practical of him." Cordelia glared at her. "Stop smiling." "I'm not smiling. Your face is doing something, and I don't like it." Ilara went to check on Noctis, because the alternative was laughing, and Cordelia was holding a very sharp quill. Ronan arrived at the camp on a morning of pale sun and thin cloud. He rode through the gate on the gray horse, and Noctis, who had been standing in the paddock doing absolutely nothing with the focused intensity of a horse who was very busy doing nothing, raised his head, spotted Ronan, and trotted to the fence. Not to bite, not to block, to greet. He stood at the fence and waited, and when Ronan dismounted and approached, Noctis extended his nose and breathed on him, and Ronan stood very still and let him, and neither of them seemed to find this remarkable, which was itself remarkable. Alara watched from the watchtower window. The morning light was gold on the mountains, and the green was spreading, and the man she loved was standing in her paddock being breathed on by her horse, and for the first time in her life, the hollow in her chest was completely, entirely, permanently gone. She went down. Ronan saw her coming across the yard, and his face did the thing it always did. The composure held, the mouth twitched, the eyes went warm and bright and helplessly, hopelessly full. "You're early," she said. "I left at midnight, couldn't sleep." "Your wolf?" "My wolf was very insistent." He paused. "My wolf would also like it noted that it made excellent time and deserves recognition." "Your wolf gets a carrot." "My wolf accepts." She reached him. He reached for her, his hand finding her waist with the ease of practice, pulling her close but not tight, leaving space, always leaving space. And she placed her hands on his chest and felt his heartbeat and the resonance and the silence of his wolf and the warmth of the sun on her back. "I brought more books," he said. "Liar." "I brought one book and an excuse." "You don't need an excuse." "I know, but old habits." He leaned his forehead against hers. "I missed you." "It's been 4 days." "I'm aware. It was a very long 4 days. My horse was extremely judgmental about the entire situation." She laughed. Not the broken gasps of the early days. A real laugh, free and warm and rising from a place inside her that had been frozen for years and was finally, irrevocably, thawed. They rode out together that afternoon. Not a patrol, not a mission, just riding, the two of them and the 2 horses, through the pass where the snow was melting and the first mountain flowers were pushing through the mud. Noctis ran ahead, because Noctis always ran ahead, his black mane streaming and his hooves churning through the remaining drifts with the joyful abandon of an animal who had been cooped up too long and was deeply pleased about the existence of open space. Ronan's gray horse followed at a dignified pace, because dignity was its primary character trait, and it refused to lower itself to the level of galloping through mud like a common horse. Ronan rode beside Alara, not behind, not ahead, beside. "The Kael'rith Council has formally recognized your authority," he said, "as the Moon Wolf Sovereign. It means any wolf in our territory can appeal to you directly for judgment, bypassing the old hierarchy. Is that going to cause problems for you?" "Probably. I look forward to it." He glanced at her. "It also means that, technically, every werewolf king, including me, owes you submission." "Every werewolf king must lower his head before the moon wolf," Alara said, recalling the ancient text. "Does that bother you?" "Does it bother me that the woman I love has the authority to command my complete obedience?" He considered this. "Bother is not the word I'd use." "What word would you use?" He looked at her with those frost-pale eyes, and the corner of his mouth lifted, and the warmth in his expression was bright enough to melt the remaining snow. "Fortunate," he said. Ahead of them, Noctis reached the top of the ridge and stopped. He stood there, massive, black, magnificent, and looked out over the pass where the camp was growing, where the people were arriving, where the world was changing. Then he deliberately kicked a spray of snow backward, directly onto Ronan's boots. "Your horse," Ronan said, looking down at his snow-covered boots, "just declared war on my footwear." He does that. Is this going to be a recurring feature of our relationship? Probably. I can live with that. He shook the snow off one boot, then the other, and looked at her with the expression of a man who was exactly where he wanted to be in the world. "I can live with everything, as long as this is the view." He wasn't looking at the mountains. Alara smiled. The sun was warm, and the pass was open, and the horse who had carried her through the darkest nights of her life was standing on a ridge kicking snow at the man she loved, and the future was not certain. It was never certain, but it was hers. Not a Luna, not a queen, not a title given by a crown or a council or a man who decided what she was worth. The moon wolf sovereign, before whom every werewolf king must lower his head. And she was laughing. Thank you for listening. Please follow Moonlit Romance Library for more Rejected Mate, Alpha Regret, and Chosen Love werewolf romances. Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories. The day Aveline Ashwood's husband came home with a younger Luna, the entire North Hall smelled of roasted venison and betrayal. She knew something was wrong the moment the iron gates groaned open at noon, because Garrick Blackmere never returned early from border campaigns. Garrick liked his wars the way he liked his ale, long, loud, and preferably involving someone else's suffering. For him to cut a 3-month campaign down to 6 weeks meant one of two things. Either the Eastern Wolf clans had surrendered spectacularly, or Garrick had found something more interesting than fighting. Aveline stood at the top of the stone staircase in Ashenmoor Keep, her hands dusted with flour because she had been in the kitchens again. She was always in the kitchens, not because anyone expected the Luna of Blackmere pack to bake bread, but because Aveline had discovered years ago that the kitchen staff were the only people in this entire frozen fortress who did not look at her with pity. My lady. Berta, the head cook, appeared at her elbow, breathless. Berta was 63 years old, built like a wardrobe, and possessed the singular talent of being able to communicate catastrophic news through the angle of her eyebrows alone. Right now, both eyebrows were practically touching her hairline. He's brought someone. He always brings someone. Last time it was 47 prisoners of war and a stolen catapult. It's not a catapult. Is it bigger than a catapult? Berta's mouth pressed into a line so thin it nearly disappeared. It's younger than a catapult. Aveline set down the bread dough. She wiped her hands on her apron slowly, methodically, the way she did everything, not because she was calm, but because she had learned that if she moved slowly enough, people assumed she was in control. She walked to the narrow window that overlooked the main courtyard, and she looked down. Garrick Blackmere rode through the gates on his black warhorse, his dark hair wind-tangled, his jaw sharp enough to cut accusations, his silver-gray eyes catching the winter light in that way that had once made her heart stutter. He was, as always, devastatingly handsome. 6 feet and 4 inches of alpha wolf wrapped in black leather and the unshakable conviction that the world owed him something. Beside him, on a white mare with ribbons braided into its mane, rode a girl. She was perhaps 23, golden-haired, pink-cheeked, wrapped in white furs that looked brand new. She rode with the particular posture of someone who had been told she was precious approximately 400 times that morning. And on her left wrist, Aveline's wolf eyes could see it clearly from this distance, was a Luna binding mark, fresh, still faintly glowing with the amber light of a completed ceremony. "Ah," Aveline said. "My lady. That is a very nice horse she's riding." "My lady, he's bound her. The mark is—" "I can see the mark, Berta." Below, the household guard was assembling. The servants were gathering. Garrick dismounted with the easy grace of a man who expected applause for existing, and then he turned and lifted the golden-haired girl down from her horse with both hands on her waist, and she giggled. She giggled. Aveline had not giggled in approximately 4 years. She was 31 years old, and she had been Garrick's Luna since she was 22. And she had run this household through 2 border wars, a grain famine, a collapsed mine shaft, 3 outbreaks of river fever, and the time the East Tower caught fire because Garrick's beta had tried to roast a whole elk indoors. She had earned every single gray hair that she did not yet have but fully expected by next winter. And now there was a girl in her courtyard wearing her title. "Well," Aveline said, untying her apron and folding it neatly, I suppose I should go down and introduce myself. It would be rude not to. My lady, you don't have to. Berta, if I don't go down there right now, I will have to go down there later, and later I will have had time to think about it, and if I think about it, I will be forced to acknowledge that my husband of 9 years has ridden home with a replacement wife like she's a new pair of boots, and I will feel something about that, and I don't feel like feeling something right now, so I'm going down. She went down. The great stone staircase of Ashenmore Keep had 114 steps. Aveline had counted them during her first week as a new bride, giddy and in love and absolutely certain that Garrick Blackmere was the greatest man alive. She counted them again now. 114 steps between who she had been 5 minutes ago and who she was about to become. The courtyard was full by the time she reached the bottom. Garrick's warriors had dismounted. The household staff had formed their usual receiving line. And there, standing at the center of it all like a painting of a saint who had wandered into the wrong chapel, was the golden-haired girl, clinging to Garrick's arm. Garrick saw Aveline. She watched it happen, the flicker of something in his silver eyes. Not guilt, exactly. Garrick Blackmere did not do guilt. It was more like the brief inconvenience of remembering that you had left a candle burning in a room you no longer intended to use. Aveline. Garrick. This is Lenora. She is the daughter of Lord Voss of Goldenmere. How nice. What is she doing here? Lenora smiled. It was a sweet smile, practiced and perfect, the kind of smile that had probably been rehearsed in a mirror decorated with dried wildflowers. I'm so honored to finally meet you, Lady Ashwood. Garrick has told me so much about. What is she doing here, Garrick? The courtyard went quiet. Even the horses stopped shifting. Garrick straightened. He was taller than Aveline by nearly a foot, and he used that height now the way he always did. Not as a weapon exactly, but as a fact. A reminder that the world was built for men of his size, and everyone else was just borrowing space. Lenora is my mate, he said, my true mate, the bond awakened during the Eastern campaign. I have already completed the Luna binding. There it was. Spoken in front of 50 people, the household guard, the kitchen staff, 2 stable boys, and a pigeon that had been sitting on the gate and was now regarding the whole scene with visible judgment. Your true mate, Aveline repeated. The pull was undeniable. I resisted for weeks, but... Weeks? You resisted for weeks. I know this is difficult. You resisted for weeks. She let the words sit there. We were married for 9 years, Garrick. 9 years. And you resisted this girl for weeks. I'm genuinely impressed by your restraint. Lenora's smile wavered. She looked up at Garrick with wide, uncertain eyes. You said she would understand. She will understand, Garrick said, and his jaw tightened in that way that meant he had already decided how this conversation was going to end and was merely waiting for reality to catch up. Aveline looked at him, really looked at him, at the face she had kissed 10,000 times, at the hands she had held through nightmares, at the man she had believed was her home. She did not cry. She had cried exactly once in her marriage, the night their first and only pregnancy had ended at 3 months, and she had bled alone in their bed because Garrick had been at a council meeting and no one had wanted to interrupt him. She had decided after that night that crying was a currency she could not afford to spend on people who would not value it. You're right, she said. I understand perfectly. Then she turned to Lenora and she smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who had balanced 9 years of household accounts, negotiated grain prices with merchants who thought female Lunas were decorative, and once physically carried a wounded border scout 6 miles through snow because the patrol wagon had broken an axle. Lady Lenora, welcome to Ashenmore Keep. I'll have the servants prepare a room for you. The East Tower is lovely this time of year. The roof leaks only when it rains, but it almost never rains here, so you should be fine. She looked back at Garrick. Except it's winter, and winter means snow, and snow melts. So I suppose the roof will leak constantly, but I'm sure your true mate is very resilient. Then she walked back inside. She made it all the way to the kitchen before her hands started shaking. Berta was waiting. Berta was always waiting. The old cook took one look at Aveline's face and said nothing, because Berta was the kind of woman who understood that sometimes the most compassionate thing you could do for someone was to simply witness their composure without testing it. "I need to leave," Aveline said. "Yes, my lady." "Tonight?" "Yes, my lady." "He'll try to keep me here, for appearances. The pack expects a proper transition of Luna status, and Garrick won't want the Northern Territories to think he discarded his Luna without cause. He'll want me to stay and smile and hand Lenora the household keys in some ridiculous ceremony so it all looks civilized. Then we don't give him the chance." "No, we don't." Aveline's mind was already working. She had always been like this. She felt things deeply, but processed them practically. Heartbreak could wait. Logistics could not. "I'm taking the ledgers," she said. "The household ledgers?" "All of them. 9 years of accounts, grain contracts, trade agreements, mine yields, border patrol rotations, and the tax reconciliation files. I wrote them. I organized them. They're in my handwriting because no one else in this keep bothered to learn double-entry bookkeeping. Without those ledgers, Garrick won't know how much grain is stored, how much is owed to Goldenmere, or when the next shipment of iron is due." Berta stared at her. Then a slow, magnificent grin spread across the cook's weathered face. "You brilliant girl. Also, I'm taking the spice cabinet. The saffron alone is worth more than Lenora's horse. I purchased every ounce of it with my personal dowry funds. It's mine." Berta laughed. It was a low, dangerous laugh, the laugh of a woman who had survived 3 husbands and trusted none of them. "What else?" Aveline considered. "My mother's silver, my books, the winter medicine stores, I compounded them myself, so they're mine, and the cheese." "The cheese?" "The aged Firewolf cheese in the cold cellar. 42 wheels. I spent 3 years perfecting that recipe. Garrick doesn't even like cheese. He won't miss it until his new Luna tries to host a feast and realizes there's nothing in the larder but salted pork and regret." By evening, Aveline had packed 14 crates. She had done it quietly, efficiently, with the help of Berta and 2 kitchen maids who had volunteered without being asked, because it turned out that the household staff had opinions about Garrick's romantic decisions, and none of those opinions were favorable. The problem was leaving. Ashenmore Keep sat on a rocky plateau surrounded by pine forest on 3 sides and a sheer cliff drop on the 4th. The main gate was guarded. The postern gate was locked at sundown, and Garrick, for all his emotional failures, was not stupid. He would expect her to try to leave, and he would have instructed the guards to prevent it, not out of love, but because a discarded Luna wandering the northern roads was politically inconvenient. Aveline was standing at the kitchen window, considering her options, when she heard the noise. It came from the old granary behind the keep, a low, rumbling sound, half growl and half whimper. She knew that sound. She had heard it before, on border patrols, in the deep forests. It was the sound of a wolf. Not a shifter wolf, not a pack wolf, but a real wolf, a wild one. She should not have gone to investigate. She had 14 crates to move, a keep to escape, and a rapidly narrowing window of time before Garrick decided to summon her for whatever humiliating conversation he was surely planning. But the sound was wrong. It was pain-wrong, and Aveline had never been able to walk away from pain-wrong sounds, which was how she had ended up married to Garrick in the first place, because 9 years ago she had heard a wounded soldier howling in the rain and had gone to help him, and the wounded soldier had turned out to be the most handsome alpha she had ever seen, and he had looked at her like she was the only warm thing in a cold world, and she had loved him. She had loved him so much. She went to the granary. The wolf was silver, not gray, not pale. Silver, like moonlight, had been hammered into fur. It was enormous, easily twice the size of a natural wolf, with eyes that shone the pale blue of glacier ice. It was also very clearly injured. Its left hind leg was caught in an old iron trap, one of the cruel, spring-loaded things that Garrick's father had set decades ago, and no one had bothered to remove. The wolf snarled when it saw her. "I know," Aveline said. I wouldn't trust me either. Everything in this keep has terrible judgment. She approached slowly. She had done this before, not with wolves this large, but with injured animals in the forest. The key was to make yourself boring, unthreatening, the kind of creature that clearly did not have the ambition to be a predator. "I'm going to look at that trap," she said, keeping her voice level. "And then I'm going to open it, and then you're going to not bite my hand off because I need my hands. I have 14 crates of cheese and spices to load onto a cart tonight, and it's really hard to drive a cart with stumps." The wolf watched her. Its ice blue eyes tracked her every movement with an intelligence that was not entirely animal. Aveline knelt beside the trap. It was rusted, but still brutally functional. The iron jaws had bitten deep enough to draw blood, but not deep enough to break bone. She studied the mechanism. She knew these traps. She had spent her first year as Luna systematically disarming them across Blackmere territory because she thought they were barbaric, and Garrick had let her because it had not seemed important enough to argue about. "This is going to hurt," she told the wolf. "I'm sorry." She pressed the release lever with both hands. The jaws opened. The wolf yelped, a sound that was far too dignified to be called a yelp, but there was no other word for it, and yanked its leg free. Then it just sat there, looking at her. "You're welcome," Aveline said. "Now please go away. I have a dramatic escape to execute, and I don't have time for a wildlife encounter." The wolf did not go away. It licked its injured paw, then stood, testing its weight. It limped, but it walked. It looked at Aveline with those impossible glacier eyes, and then it looked at the keep, and then it looked back at Aveline. Then it lay down across the granary doorway. "You're not helping." It yawned. Its teeth were very large. "Fine, guard the door. That's useful. I'm going to go be publicly humiliated now, and then I'm going to steal my own cheese and leave. If anyone asks, you didn't see me." She left the wolf in the granary. She had larger problems. The summons came at dusk. A servant, not one of the loyal kitchen staff, but one of Garrick's personal attendants, a thin man named Harwick, who had the personality of a damp sock, knocked on Aveline's chamber door and informed her that the Alpha required her presence in the Great Hall. "Required," Aveline repeated. "His word, my lady." Of course it was. She dressed carefully. Not in the plain wool she usually wore for kitchen work, but in the one fine gown she owned, deep midnight blue with silver thread at the cuffs, the gown she had sewn herself for last winter's solstice feast. She braided her dark auburn hair and pinned it with her mother's silver combs. She did not do this for Garrick. She did it for herself, because she understood that in the next hour her dignity was going to be tested. And dignity was easier to maintain when you felt like you looked like someone who deserved it. The Great Hall of Ashenmore Keep was a massive stone room with a vaulted ceiling supported by pillars carved to look like wolves standing on their hind legs. Garrick sat in the Alpha's chair on the raised dais at the far end, and Lenora sat beside him in a smaller chair that had been hastily draped with white silk. That chair had been Aveline's. She had sat in it for 9 years. She walked the length of the hall. Every step echoed. The pack was assembled, warriors, elders, household staff. They watched her with expressions ranging from sympathy to discomfort to the specific blank-faced neutrality of people who knew something was wrong, but were not personally willing to do anything about it. "Aveline," Garrick said, and he had the decency to look uncomfortable, though whether that was actual guilt or just the social inconvenience of explaining to a room full of people why he had replaced a perfectly functional wife, she could not tell. "Please sit." There was no chair for her. "Where?" she asked. The silence was surgical. Garrick's beta, a barrel-shaped man named Griff, who had the emotional intelligence of a fence post but at least the honesty of one, shifted his weight and muttered something that might have been a curse. "A chair," Garrick snapped at a servant. "Bring a chair." They brought a chair, a small wooden one, the kind used by scribes, and they set it below the dais, not on the platform. Below it. Below Garrick. Below Lenora. Aveline looked at the chair. She looked at Garrick. She did not sit. You have something to say to me, she said. Say it standing. A low male voice came from the Western delegation near the rear doors. Then standing is the only honest position left in this hall. Aveline turned. 12 riders in silver-edged cloaks stood beneath the carved wolf pillars, road dust still whitening their boots. At their center was a black-haired man in a closed black coat, taller than Garrick and unnervingly still. He wore no crown and no pack crest, only a narrow silver clasp shaped like a wolf fang. He had arrived at noon as a Western road envoy, and until that moment he had said nothing. Garrick's expression hardened. This is a private pack matter. You summoned the full household, 2 visiting lords and foreign witnesses, the stranger replied. His pale eyes moved once to the scribe's stool below the dais, then returned to Aveline. It stopped being private when you removed your Luna's chair. He did not step in front of her. He did not offer to speak for her. He merely stayed where she could see him, a silent witness whose attention held no pity. For the first time that evening, Aveline felt observed without feeling diminished. Garrick's jaw worked. She knew that look. It was the look he got when reality was not performing according to his expectations. The bond between Lenora and me is a true mate bond, he said. It cannot be denied. Pack law recognizes. I know what pack law recognizes, Garrick. I rewrote half of it. That a true mate bond supersedes a ceremonial marriage. When confirmed by the Pack Elder Council, witnessed by 3 neutral alphas, and recorded in the Sovereignty Ledger, which I also maintain, none of which has happened. Garrick's eyes narrowed. It will happen. Then let it happen properly. But you didn't call me here to discuss procedure, did you? Lenora leaned forward. She had changed into a white gown embroidered with gold, probably from the keep's own textile stores, which Aveline had stocked herself. And she had the expression of someone who was trying very hard to appear gracious, and was mostly just appearing nervous. Lady Ashwood, Lenora said, I want you to know that I never intended to. To what? Take my husband? Take my title? Take my chair? I know this must be painful. What's painful is that you're wearing a gown made from fabric I imported from the southern weavers at a rate of 12 silver marks per bolt, and you've cut the hem crooked. Lenora looked down at her hem. It was in fact crooked. Aveline turned back to Garrick. What are your terms? You'll be given quarters in the East Tower. The tower with the leaking roof. And you'll retain the courtesy title of Lady Ashwood. How generous, a leaking tower and a fake name. And you'll participate in the formal transition ceremony where you'll transfer the Luna Seal to Lenora in front of the pack. The Luna Seal. It was a medallion of dark iron, stamped with the Blackmere wolf, worn by every Luna of the pack for generations. Aveline had worn it for 9 years. She reached up and touched it now, feeling the cool metal against her collarbone. You want me to hand my seal to this girl, in public, and smile. I want you to do it with grace, Aveline. You've always had grace. Grace, she repeated. You want me to have grace. She looked at him, at this man she had loved since she was 22, this man whose nightmares she had soothed, whose wounds she had stitched, whose household she had held together with nothing but stubbornness and double-entry bookkeeping. She looked at the silver in his eyes and remembered when those eyes had looked at her like she was the only thing worth seeing. All right, she said. When is the ceremony? 3 days. 3 days. Fine. She paused. But Garrick? Yes. You should know that I've taken the household ledgers. The room shifted. Garrick's expression changed. All of them, she continued. Grain stores, trade contracts, mine yields, tax reconciliations, patrol rotations, every record of how this keep functions. I wrote them. They're mine. Aveline. Also the spice cabinet and the aged Firewolf cheese. 42 wheels. I'd say I'm sorry, but I spent 3 years perfecting that recipe while you were off deciding which wars to start, so I'm not even a little bit sorry. Griff, the beta, made a choking sound that might have been a laugh. He turned it into a cough. You can't take the ledgers, Garrick said, standing. Those are pack property. They're written in my personal cipher. Nobody else can read them, which means they're either my property or they're very expensive kindling. Your choice. Lenora looked between them with the expression of someone who had just realized that the fairy tale she had walked into had footnotes she had not read. I'll give you the ledger cipher key, Aveline said. When I am released from this marriage with my full dowry restored, my mother's silver returned, and a formal letter of good standing signed by you and witnessed by 3 neutral alphas. Until then, I hope Lenora is good at arithmetic, because winter tax season starts in 6 weeks, and the northern mines will want their yield reports. She turned and walked out of the great hall. Behind her, she heard Garrick say, Aveline, and she did not stop. She did not stop until she reached the granary, where the silver wolf was still lying across the doorway, and then she sat down on an overturned bucket, and she pressed her hands over her face, and she breathed. The wolf lifted its head and watched her. Don't look at me like that, she said, her voice cracking exactly once. I'm fine. The wolf stood. It limped over to her on its injured paw and pressed its enormous silver head against her knee. Its fur was surprisingly warm. It smelled like pine sap and cold stone, and something else, something sharp and electric, like the air before a lightning strike. She put her hand on the wolf's head. She did not cry. But she sat there for a long time with her hand on a wild animal's silver fur, and she breathed, and she planned. 3 days, Garrick had said. She would be gone in 1. The escape happened at the 3rd bell past midnight. Berta had arranged a cart. Not one of the fine ones from the keep's carriage house, but a sturdy farm cart from the village below, driven by Berta's nephew Tam, a lanky 19-year-old with perpetually startled hair and the useful quality of asking no questions about anything ever. Where are we going? Tam asked. South, Aveline said. How far south? Far enough that Garrick Blackmere's name is a boring fact and not a present danger. That's very far south. Then I hope this horse is well rested. They loaded the crates in silence. 14 crates of ledgers, spices, medicine, cheese, silver, and books. Everything Aveline owned, everything she had earned. Her entire life in Ashenmore. Keep reduced to what could fit on a farm cart. The silver wolf appeared as they were finishing. It materialized from the tree line like a patch of moonlight that had decided to go for a walk, and it sat at the edge of the clearing and watched them with those glacier blue eyes. No, Aveline said. The wolf tilted its head. I am not adopting a wild wolf. I have enough problems. The wolf stood up and walked to the cart and lay down underneath it. That's not, you can't just... Tam looked at the wolf, looked at Aveline. It seems decided, my lady. It's a wild animal. It seems like a decided wild animal. They left. The postern gate had been locked, as Aveline had expected, but Berta had one final gift, the key. She had taken it from Harwick's belt while he was eating supper, because Berta had the hands of a pickpocket and the moral flexibility of a woman who had watched her mistress be humiliated in front of 50 people. Go, Berta said, pressing the key into Aveline's hand. Don't stop until you're past the river crossing, and don't come back for that man, not if he begs on both knees. Berta. Don't you dare cry, not for him. You cry when you're somewhere warm and safe and eating your own cheese, and not a moment before. Aveline hugged her. Berta was not a hugger. She tolerated the embrace the way she tolerated overcooked meat, with stiff disapproval and a faint tremor that suggested hidden emotion, but she hugged Aveline back. Go, she said again. They went. The cart rattled down the mountain road in the dark. Tam drove. Aveline sat beside him, wrapped in her cloak, the Luna seal still around her neck. She had considered leaving it. She had held it in her hand and looked at it, and thought about setting it on Garrick's pillow with a note that said something cutting and memorable. But she did not leave it, not because she wanted to keep it, but because she had earned it, and she was done leaving behind things she had earned. The silver wolf trotted alongside the cart. Its limp was improving. In the moonlight, its fur shone like liquid metal, and its glacier eyes caught every shadow, every movement, every rustle in the dark pines. It moved with the particular alertness of an animal that was not following, it was escorting. They traveled south for 3 days. On the first day, they crossed the Blackmere border into unclaimed territory, the vast, lawless stretch of pine forests and rocky valleys between the northern wolf packs and the Silver Reaches. Tam drove the cart with the grim determination of a young man who had been raised by Berta and therefore feared nothing in the known world except his aunt's displeasure. Aveline navigated from memory because she had spent years studying the maps in Ashenmore Keep's library, while Garrick had been too busy being alpha to notice that his wife had memorized every road, river, and border crossing in the Northern Territories. On the second day, they ran into bandits. There were 5 of them. They emerged from the trees at a narrow point in the road where the pines pressed close and the cart could not turn around. They were the usual sort, rough, unwashed, armed with short swords, and the misplaced confidence of men who had never met a woman who could lift a grain sack over her head with one arm. Aveline could lift a grain sack over her head with one arm. Off the cart, the lead bandit said. He was missing 2 teeth and most of his charm. Leave the cargo. Aveline looked at him. She looked at the cart full of her possessions. She looked at the wheel of firewolf cheese that was sitting on top of the nearest crate, aged to perfection, worth approximately 40 silver marks at market. No, she said. The bandit blinked. That wasn't a request. I know. My answer is still no. The silver wolf, which had been trotting ahead of the cart, came back. It walked out of the trees with the silent, deliberate gait of a predator that had been politely waiting for an excuse. It was enormous in the daylight, shoulder height to a man's chest, teeth like ivory daggers, glacier eyes fixed on the lead bandit with the focused intensity of a creature that had already done the math and decided that 5 against 1 was unfair, but only for the 5. The bandits looked at the wolf. The wolf looked at the bandits. The lead bandit looked at Aveline. Is that yours? I really couldn't say. It followed me home. I think it likes cheese. The wolf growled. It was not a dramatic growl. It was a low, continuous rumble like a mountain clearing its throat before an avalanche. The sound vibrated in the bones. The bandits left. They did not run, they were too proud for that, but they walked very quickly in the opposite direction, which was essentially the same thing with better posture. Tam exhaled. My lady, your wolf just scared off 5 armed men. It's not my wolf. The wolf walked back to the cart and lay down underneath it again. It seems like your wolf. On the 3rd day, they reached Brindlewood. Brindlewood was not a town so much as a collection of buildings that had agreed to stand near each other. A trading post, a blacksmith, a tavern called the Crooked Antler, and a scattering of stone cottages clinging to the hillside like determined barnacles. It sat at the crossroads where the northern road met the old King's Highway, and it was the kind of place where people came to disappear. Aveline did not intend to disappear. She intended to regroup, resupply, and formulate a plan that extended beyond go south. But first, she needed information, and information lived in taverns. The Crooked Antler was warm, dim, and smelled of wood smoke and spilled ale. The proprietress was a tall, sharp-faced woman named Marin, who had the look of someone who had seen everything and was disappointed by most of it. Looking for a room? Marin asked, wiping down the bar with a cloth that had probably been white sometime during the previous century. Looking for news, Aveline said. What's happening in the territories? Any major pack movements? Marin studied her. Aveline was still wearing her midnight blue gown, travel-stained now, and her mother's silver combs, and the Luna seal around her neck. She did not look like a refugee. She looked like a Luna who had decided to go for a very long walk. You're from Blackmere, Marin said. I was. Heard something about that? Alpha Blackmere took a new Luna? News travels fast. Merchants talk, especially when they're drunk. Marin leaned on the bar. Lot of unrest in the territories right now. The Silver Reaches have been quiet for years, but the new Silver Wolf King took his throne about 2 years back. He's been consolidating the Western Packs. Rumor is he's building something. Army, alliance, nobody knows. But the Northern Alphas are nervous, Blackmere included. The Silver Wolf King, Aveline repeated. She had heard the title. Everyone had. The Silver Reaches were a vast territory to the west, historically fractured, historically weak. But 2 years ago, a new king had emerged, a wolf of unknown lineage who had united the Western Packs through a combination of military brilliance, political cunning, and what the rumors described as an unsettling amount of personal charisma. Nobody knew much about him. He did not attend councils. He did not send emissaries to social functions. He was, by all accounts, a ghost who happened to command the largest wolf army west of the mountains. The Silver Wolf King doesn't concern me, Aveline said. I need to find work, something that uses organizational skills and an extremely detailed knowledge of northern trade routes. Marin raised an eyebrow. You're a bookkeeper? I'm a Luna who ran a keep for 9 years. I can do accounts, negotiate trade contracts, manage provision routes, mediate territorial disputes, compound medicines, bake bread, and disarm iron traps. I can also lift a grain sack over my head with one arm, but I prefer to lead with the bookkeeping. Marin smiled. It was a thin, surprised smile, the smile of a woman who had not expected to be impressed and was annoyed at herself for it. There's a position, she said. Not here, north of here, actually. The border garrison at Thornwall, it's a neutral outpost, sits right on the line between unclaimed territory and the Silver Reaches. They need a quartermaster. The last one embezzled the supply funds and ran off with a traveling bard. A quartermaster position at a border garrison. It's not glamorous, but it's legitimate work, and the garrison commander doesn't care about pack politics. They just need someone who can count barrels and not steal from them. Aveline considered. A border garrison was not where she had imagined ending up, but it was work. It was far from Ashenmoor, and it was the kind of position where her skills would actually be valued rather than taken for granted. I'll take it, she said. You haven't even asked about the pay. Does it come with quarters that don't have a leaking roof? Stone cottage, dry, comes with a fireplace. Then I'll take it. She left Brindlewood the next morning with Tam, the cart, and the Silver Wolf. Hayes had spent the night beneath the tavern eaves, waking at every wagon wheel an unfamiliar scent. At sunrise it rose, shook frost from its coat, and followed the cart without invitation. The road to Thornwall wound through increasingly wild terrain. The pines grew taller, the valleys grew deeper. The air tasted of snow and granite, and the particular silence that came from being very far away from anyone who might help you. It was on this road that Aveline met the black-haired Western witness from Ashenmoor again. He stepped from the pines alone this time, without the 12 silver-cloaked riders who had stood behind him in the Great Hall. Aveline recognized the disciplined stillness before she recognized his face. Men did not walk alone in the borderlands unless they were foolish or dangerous, and nothing about him suggested foolishness. His pale eyes took in the farm cart, the travel-stained gown, the 14 crates, and the Silver Wolf pacing beside her horse. You left before dawn, he said. You watched my husband remove my chair and said almost nothing. You did not need a stranger to win the argument for you. His gaze stayed level with hers. You needed someone powerful enough to remember exactly what they did after everyone else decided it was more convenient to forget. The answer should have irritated her. Instead, it settled somewhere uncomfortably close to relief. Then he glanced at the horse and his expression sharpened. Aveline blinked. He was beautiful, not handsome in the way Garrick was handsome, sharp and aggressive and designed to impress. This man was beautiful the way a storm was beautiful, the way a blade was beautiful, the way something dangerous was beautiful, precisely because it did not care whether you found it beautiful or not. His eyes were pale gray, almost silver, set in a face with cheekbones that could have been carved by a sculptor who was showing off. He wore dark leather and fur, practical, well-made, but not ornamental. No insignia, no pack markings, nothing to identify him. He stopped in the middle of the road and looked at the cart. Then he looked at Aveline. Then he looked at the silver wolf, which had been trotting beside the cart and was now standing very still, its glacier eyes fixed on the stranger with an expression that Aveline could not read. The wolf did not growl. It did not snarl. It did not flatten its ears or bare its teeth. It simply stood there and looked at the man, and the man looked back at it, and something passed between them that Aveline did not understand. Then the man looked at her again. "Your horse is about to throw a shoe," he said. His voice was low and quiet, the kind of voice that did not need volume because it had weight, the kind of voice that entered a room and made other voices seem optional. Aveline looked at the horse. The right front shoe was indeed loose, the nails were bending, and the shoe was shifting with each step. She had not noticed. She should have noticed. She was better than this. "Thank you," she said. "I'll fix it at the next stop." "The next stop is Thornwall. That's 4 miles uphill. Your horse won't make it 4 miles on a loose shoe on this terrain." "Then I'll fix it here." She climbed down from the cart. She had tools, a basic farrier kit that Berta had packed because Berta thought of everything. She knelt beside the horse and examined the shoe. The nails were bent, the shoe was warped, and the hoof needed trimming. It was a 20-minute job if you knew what you were doing. Aveline knew what she was doing. She had learned farriery during the grain famine when the keep's blacksmith had died of river fever and no one else had been willing to learn. The stranger watched her. He did not offer to help. Most men would have. Most men would have shouldered in and taken the tools from her hands and done the job themselves because most men assumed that a woman kneeling beside a horse was a woman who needed rescuing. This man simply leaned against a tree and watched her with those pale silver eyes, and the thing she felt from him was not condescension, it was interest. "You're good at that," he said, after she had removed the warped shoe and begun trimming the hoof. "I'm good at most things." "That's not arrogance. That's inventory." She looked up at him. He was not smiling, but there was something at the corner of his mouth. Not quite amusement, not quite warmth, but something that lived in the neighborhood of both. "Who are you?" she asked. "A traveler. Travelers don't walk alone in the borderlands." "Some do. Stupid ones." "You're traveling with a farm cart, a boy, and a wolf. I wouldn't call that a full military escort." "The wolf is very intimidating." He looked at the wolf. The wolf was currently lying on its side in a patch of sunlight, its injured paw in the air, its tongue hanging out. It looked approximately as intimidating as a large silver throw pillow. "Terrifying," the man said. Aveline felt her mouth twitch. She pressed it down. She was not in the mood to find strange men in the forest amusing. She had recently been replaced by a 23-year-old with a crooked hem, and her sense of humor was on temporary leave. She finished the hoof, fitted a spare shoe from the farrier kit, and nailed it into place. It was not her best work. She did not have a proper anvil, but it would hold to Thornwall. "Thank you for the warning about the shoe," she said, standing and brushing off her skirts. "You're going to Thornwall?" "I am." "The garrison?" "The garrison." He was quiet for a moment. Those pale eyes studied her. Not the way Garrick had studied her, which was the way a man studied something he owned, but the way a cartographer studied a coastline, with attention and a certain careful distance. "The road forks in half a mile," he said. "Take the left fork. The right one looks shorter, but crosses a washout that'll break your axle." "How do you know this road so well?" "I walk it." "Alone?" "Alone." She looked at him, and he looked at her, and there was a moment, a brief, electric moment like the air before a lightning strike when something shifted. She did not know what it was. She only knew that this man was looking at her like she was not a discarded Luna, not a woman who had been replaced, not a problem to be managed or a chair to be removed from a dais. He was looking at her like she was a person who had just reshot a horse in the middle of nowhere, and that was interesting. "Thank you," she said again, "for the road advice." He inclined his head, just slightly, a nod of respect, not of dismissal. Then he turned and walked back into the forest, and the trees closed behind him like a curtain, and he was gone. Tam stared after him. "My lady, who was that?" "I don't know." "He was very tall." "Yes." "And very intense." "Yes." "Do you think he was dangerous?" Aveline considered this. The silver wolf had stood up from its sunlit nap and was staring into the trees where the man had disappeared. Its tail was not tucked. Its ears were not flattened. If anything, it looked almost expectant. "Yes," Aveline said. "I think he was very dangerous, and I think he was very polite about it." Thornwall Garrison was built into the side of a cliff. It was not a beautiful building. It was a practical building. Thick stone walls, narrow windows, a heavy iron gate, and the general aesthetic of a structure that had been designed by someone who expected to be attacked and wanted the building to look disappointed about it in advance. The garrison commander was a woman named Captain Lyra Dane, who was, Aveline did a quick calculation, probably no older than 35, but looked like she had personally wrestled every one of those years and won. She was short, muscular, with close-cropped dark hair and a scar across her left cheekbone that she wore with the casual indifference of someone who had more interesting things to think about than her own face. "You're the new quartermaster?" Lyra said, looking Aveline up and down. "I am." "You look like a Luna." "I was." "Blackmere?" "Does everyone know?" "Merchant gossip. It's the only entertainment out here." Lyra gestured at the garrison. "This is Thornwall. We have 40 soldiers, a storage problem, a provision route that hasn't worked properly since the last quartermaster stole everything, and a strategic position on the border of the Silver Reaches that makes us either very important or very expendable, depending on who you ask." "Who do you ask?" "I try not to ask anyone anything. It's easier that way." Lyra looked at the cart. "Is that cheese?" 42 wheels of aged Firewolf cheese. "Firewolf cheese!" "I made it myself." Lyra's expression shifted from professional assessment to something that looked dangerously close to hope. "Can you cook?" "I can do many things, but I'm here to be your quartermaster, not your chef." "Can you be both?" "Captain Voss, I can be whatever this garrison needs me to be, as long as I am paid fairly, housed in quarters with a roof that does not leak, and never, under any circumstances, asked to hand my professional accomplishments to a younger woman while smiling." Lyra blinked. Then she laughed. It was a short, sharp laugh, the laugh of someone who did not laugh often and was surprised to find herself doing it. "Welcome to Thornwall, Lady Ashwood." "Aveline. Just Aveline." "Welcome to Thornwall, Aveline. Your quarters are in the East Wing. The roof doesn't leak, the fireplace works, and if you can fix our provision route, I'll personally fight anyone who bothers you." Aveline moved in. The stone cottage attached to the East Wing was small but solid, a single room with a fireplace, a bed with an actual mattress, a desk, and a window that overlooked the valley below. She unpacked her crates with the systematic efficiency of a woman who had done this before and intended to do it only one more time, because the next place she unpacked would be permanent. The silver wolf followed her into the cottage, sniffed every corner with great thoroughness, and then lay down in front of the fireplace and fell asleep. "You live here now," Aveline said to the wolf. "Apparently." The wolf's tail thumped once against the stone floor. She named it Haze because its silver fur blurred against morning mist. She did not pretend it was tame. It slept near the door rather than the hearth, woke at every unfamiliar scent, and left for hours to range the tree line before returning on its own terms. Tam stopped calling it a pet after Hayes ignored him for an entire day and then stole only the strip of meat he had been saving for himself. "Very wild," Tam said, "extremely untamed." "Shut up, Tam." Aveline threw herself into the quartermaster work with the single-minded intensity of a woman who needed to not think about her ex-husband. The garrison's supply situation was, as Lyra had warned, catastrophic. The previous quartermaster had embezzled roughly 60% of the supply budget, falsified the inventory records, and left behind a filing system that appeared to have been organized by a drunk badger. "This is chaos," Aveline said, staring at a ledger that listed 40 barrels of salt in storage. The actual storage room contained 6 barrels of salt, 2 barrels of what might once have been salt but was now a mysterious gray substance, and a family of mice. "Welcome to my life," Lyra said. "How have you been feeding 40 soldiers?" "Badly, and with a lot of hunting. My soldiers eat more venison than any garrison in the territories. They're starting to dream about deer." "That ends now." Aveline rolled up her sleeves. "I need access to the garrison's trade accounts, your existing supplier contracts. If any survived the embezzlement, the regional merchant registry, and a complete physical inventory of every storage room, cellar, and closet in this building." Lyra stared at her. "You want to inventory every closet?" "I once found 14 pounds of missing saffron in a broom cupboard in Ashenmore Keep. You would be amazed at what people hide in closets." Within a week, Aveline had rebuilt the inventory system from scratch. Within 2 weeks, she had renegotiated 3 supplier contracts, secured a new grain source from a farming community 2 valleys south, and discovered that the garrison's armory budget had been paying for a subscription to a traveling theater troupe that the previous quartermaster had apparently been very fond of. "A theater troupe," Lyra said flatly. "The Wandering Wolves. They perform romantic ballads and dramatic reenactments of famous pack battles. Your former quartermaster was paying them 12 silver marks a month to perform private shows." "Private shows?" "In the supply cellar, which explains why the cellar always smelled like stage makeup." Lyra pressed her hands over her face. "I am going to find that man, and I am going to make him eat every script." The garrison soldiers, who had been surviving on venison and suspicion, responded to Aveline's arrival with the cautious optimism of people who had been disappointed before but were willing to try hope one more time. She reorganized the kitchen. She fixed the bread oven, which had a cracked firebox that no one had bothered to repair because no one had bothered to bake bread. She introduced the Firewolf cheese, which caused a minor sensation. The soldiers had never tasted anything like it, and one of them, a young woman named Petra, who was built like a siege engine and had the most infectious laugh in the garrison, actually cried. "This is the best thing I've ever eaten," Petra said, tears streaming down her face. "It's cheese," Aveline said. "It's the best cheese. It's cheese that understands me." Petra became Aveline's first real friend at Thornwall. She was 24, the daughter of a blacksmith from the Eastern Valleys, and she had joined the garrison because, in her words, "I wanted to hit things professionally, and the garrison was hiring." She was loud, warm, fearless, and possessed of a laugh that could be heard 3 rooms away and made everyone in those 3 rooms feel better about their lives. The other person who attached herself to Aveline was Nessa, the garrison's healer, a quiet, precise woman of about 40 with steady hands, gray-streaked dark hair, and the particular calm of someone who had seen a lot of blood and had decided to respond to it with competence rather than panic. Nessa did not talk much, but when she did, every word counted, and she had a dry, understated humor that surfaced at unexpected moments like a fish in a still pond. "Your wolf is in my herb garden again," Nessa said one morning, appearing at Aveline's door with the expression of a woman who was trying to be annoyed and failing. "It's not my wolf. It ate my chamomile." "Wolves don't eat chamomile." "This one does. It also dug up my valerian root and rolled in it. My entire herb garden smells like a wolf who is having a very relaxing day." Hayes adjusted to the garrison without becoming a house animal. It slept where it could see both the door and the window, followed Aveline only when strangers entered, and patrolled the outer wall at dusk. Once it dug through Nessa's chamomile bed while tracking a vole and rolled in the crushed leaves afterward, smelling so strongly of herbs that even the sentries kept sneezing. Its protection was instinctive rather than obedient. It placed itself between Aveline and danger, but it did not wait for commands. 3 weeks after Aveline arrived at Thornwall, the stranger from the forest appeared again. She was in the garrison courtyard, arguing with a merchant about the price of lamp oil. The merchant wanted 6 silver marks per barrel. Aveline wanted 4, and they had been negotiating for 20 minutes with the intensity of 2 people who both knew the fair price was 5, but were too stubborn to say it first when she saw him. He was standing at the garrison gate. Just standing there, leaning against the stone wall with his arms crossed, watching her negotiate with an expression that was carefully, deliberately blank except for his eyes, which were not blank at all. Those pale silver eyes were watching her with a focus that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. He was dressed differently than before, still dark leather and fur, but cleaner, more deliberate, as if he had actually considered what to wear before leaving the house, which struck Aveline as unusual for a man who claimed to be a wandering traveler. 5 marks, the merchant said. 4.5. 5. 4.5. And I'll buy your entire stock of tallow candles at market rate. The merchant considered. Done. Aveline shook his hand, signed the purchase order, and turned to find the stranger standing approximately 6 feet behind her. He had moved from the gate to the courtyard without making a sound, which was either impressive or alarming and was probably both. You're good at that, he said. You said that last time, about the horseshoe. It was true last time. It's true now. Is there something I can help you with, traveler? I'm passing through. Thornwall is on my route. Your route to where? Various places. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have. Up close, in daylight, he was even more striking than she remembered. The angles of his face were sharp but not harsh. Strong jaw, straight nose, those impossible cheekbones. His hair was very black, cut short enough to be practical but long enough to look deliberate. And his eyes, pale gray, almost silver, almost the same color as Hayes's fur, which was a coincidence that Aveline noted and filed away. You found Thornwall then, he said. The left fork. The left fork. My axle survived. Thank you. Your wolf seems to like it here. He nodded toward Hayes, who was lying in a sunny spot near the well. The wolf lifted its head when the man looked at it, and again that strange, unreadable exchange passed between them. Not hostility, not fear, but something that looked almost like recognition. It's not my wolf, Aveline said. It's lying in the sun waiting for you to finish working so it can follow you back inside. It's your wolf. Are you an expert on wolf ownership? I have some experience. His mouth did that thing again, the almost something at the corner. Not a smile, the suggestion of a smile. The architectural plans for a smile that had been approved but not yet constructed. I didn't get your name last time, Aveline said. You didn't ask. I'm asking now. He was quiet for a moment. Evander. Evander. No family name? No pack? Just Evander. That's unusual. I'm an unusual person. Lyra appeared at the courtyard entrance, took one look at Evander, and stopped. Her hand went to her sword, not drawing it, but resting on the hilt in the casual way of a soldier who wanted everyone to know she was armed. Who's this? Lyra asked. A traveler, Aveline said, passing through. Lyra looked at Evander. Evander looked at Lyra. There was a moment of mutual assessment. 2 people who were both very good at evaluating threats, sizing each other up with the professional efficiency of predators who had agreed not to fight but wanted to establish the terms. Travelers don't usually stand in my courtyard watching my quartermaster negotiate, Lyra said. Your quartermaster is very good at negotiating, Evander said. It's worth watching. Lyra's eyebrow went up. She looked at Aveline. Aveline looked at the sky. You can stay one night, Lyra said. There's a room in the guest wing. Meals are at the bell. Don't touch anything you're not supposed to touch. I wouldn't dream of it, Evander said, and for the first time his mouth actually curved into something that was undeniably, technically, a smile. It was a very small smile. It lasted approximately 2 seconds. And it was, Aveline thought with great annoyance, extremely effective. He stayed one night. He ate dinner in the mess hall with the soldiers, and he said very little, and he watched everything. And when Petra tried to engage him in a drinking contest, because Petra tried to engage everyone in a drinking contest, he declined politely and said, "I don't drink with people who can clearly outdrink me." Petra beamed. "I like him," she told Aveline. "You like everyone." "I like him specifically. He's got good eyes." "He's got eyes. I don't know that they're good." "They're good. Trust me. That man looks at you like you're the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life." "Petra, I'm just saying." "Please stop just saying." In the morning, Evander was gone. He had left before dawn, the guest room neatly arranged, the bed made with military precision. The only evidence he had been there at all was a small bundle left on the windowsill of Aveline's cottage. A bunch of dried wildflowers, the kind that grew only in the deep forests of the borderlands, tied with a strip of dark leather. There was no note. Aveline stared at the flowers for a very long time. Then she put them in a cup of water on her desk and went back to work, because she was a practical woman and she did not have time to develop feelings about mysterious strangers who left wildflowers on windowsills. She had provision routes to manage and a garrison to feed and 42 wheels of cheese to distribute before spring. Hayes sniffed the flowers and wagged its tail. "Don't start," Aveline told the wolf. Evander came back. He came back a week later, then 5 days after that, then 4 days, then 3. Each time he appeared at the garrison gate like a man who happened to be passing through, and each time he stayed one night, and each time he watched Aveline with those pale silver eyes that saw everything and revealed nothing, and each time he left dried wildflowers on her windowsill. The second time, he helped her repair a broken supply cart. He worked beside her in easy silence, his hands steady and precise. And when she struggled with a stubborn bolt, he did not take the wrench from her. He simply braced the axle so she could get better leverage. And when the bolt finally gave way, he said, "That bolt didn't stand a chance," and she laughed before she could stop herself. The third time, he arrived during a rainstorm. The garrison was battened down, the soldiers huddled in the mess hall, and Evander appeared at the gate soaking wet with the calm demeanor of a man who had been rained on before and had decided it was not worth having an opinion about. Aveline gave him a blanket. He wrapped it around his shoulders and sat in her cottage while she made tea, and Hayes lay between them and sighed with the deep contentment of a wolf who was exactly where it wanted to be. "You're settling in," Evander said, looking around the cottage. She had made it hers. The desk covered in orderly ledgers, the shelf of medicine jars, the silver combs on the mantel, a wheel of firewolf cheese aging on a rack in the corner. "I'm working," she corrected. "There's a difference?" "For me, there isn't. Work is the only thing I've ever had that no one could take away from me." She paused. She had not meant to say that. It had come out before she could stop it, the way truth sometimes did when you were warm and dry and sitting near someone whose silence felt safe. Evander looked at her. The firelight caught his face, softening those sharp angles, making his pale eyes look almost warm. "Someone tried to take everything from you," he said. "It was not a question. My husband replaced me with a younger woman and expected me to hand over my title with a smile. I took the cheese and the ledgers instead." "You took the ledgers?" "All of them, written in my personal cipher. Without them, he can't run the keep. He doesn't know how much grain is stored, what the trade contracts say, or when the taxes are due. I imagine it's very inconvenient for him." Evander stared at her. And then he did something Aveline had not seen him do before. He laughed. Not a small laugh, not a polite laugh. A real laugh, low and warm and startled out of him like a bird flushed from cover. It changed his entire face. It made him look younger, more open, almost vulnerable. "You stole his ledgers," he said. "You held his entire keep hostage with bookkeeping. And 42 wheels of cheese. And 42 wheels of cheese." He was still laughing, quietly now, shaking his head. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" He looked at her. The laughter had faded, but something remained, something warm and careful and very, very focused. "I didn't expect anything," he said. "That's the problem. I walked into that forest 3 weeks ago expecting nothing, and I found you fixing a horseshoe in the middle of nowhere with flower dust still on your sleeve, and I haven't been able to stop coming back." The air between them changed. Aveline felt it, a shift, a tightening, like the atmosphere before a storm. She was suddenly very aware of how close he was sitting, and how the firelight played across his hands, and how his voice had dropped to something quiet and private that felt like it was meant only for this room. "Evander." "I know," he said. "You're not ready. You've just had your world broken, and you're rebuilding, and the last thing you need is another man who thinks he knows what you want." He paused. "But I want you to know that I see you. Not what you were to him, not what you lost. You, the woman who stole her own cheese and ran." She could not speak. There was something lodged in her throat, not tears, not words, but something larger than both. Something that felt like being seen for the first time in 9 years. "I'm going to leave flowers on your windowsill again," he said, "and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to keep coming back, and you don't have to do anything about that. You don't have to feel anything about that, but I wanted you to know." He stood. He left the blanket folded neatly on the chair. He walked to the door. "Evander." He turned. "The flowers," she said. "I like the blue ones." Something moved in his eyes, something fierce and soft and barely controlled. He nodded, once, and then he left. The next time he came, the flowers on her windowsill were all blue. The news from Ashenmore arrived 6 weeks after Aveline's escape, carried by a merchant who had the look of a man who knew his gossip was valuable and intended to extract maximum ale in exchange for it. "Blackmere's a mess," the merchant announced to the Crooked Antler in Brindlewood, where Aveline happened to be purchasing supplies. "The new Luna can't manage the household. Grain stores are wrong, trade contracts are lapsing, the winter taxes are late, and the northern miners are threatening to withhold iron shipments because nobody can find the yield agreements." "How terrible," Aveline said, signing a purchase order for 60 pounds of salt. "The Alpha's furious. He's been tearing the keep apart looking for the old ledgers. Apparently they're written in some kind of code nobody can crack. A cipher. It's called a cipher. Whatever it is, the new Luna tried to reconstruct the accounts and got the grain totals so wrong that they accidentally ordered triple the usual wheat shipment and have nowhere to store it. There's wheat stacked in the Great Hall." Aveline allowed herself one small, precise smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent 9 years being underestimated and was now watching the entirely predictable consequences of that underestimation unfold. "Also," the merchant added, lowering his voice, "word is Blackmere is looking for her. The old Luna. He's sent scouts south." The smile faded. "He wants the ledgers?" Aveline asked. "He wants the ledgers. He wants the cipher key, and..." The merchant hesitated. "Some say he wants her back. Not as Luna. That ship sailed, what with the new mate bond and all, but as, I don't know, steward, advisor? The word people use is asset." "Asset," Aveline repeated. His word, not mine. Asset. 9 years of marriage, and she was an asset, like a horse, like a trade contract, like a very useful piece of furniture that you did not appreciate until someone moved it and you discovered that the floor underneath was scratched. She finished her purchases. She loaded them onto the cart. She drove back to Thornwall with her jaw set and her hands steady and her heart doing something complicated that she refused to examine. Garrick was looking for her. Garrick wanted his ledgers back. Garrick wanted his asset back. She was not going back. The first time Evander touched her, really touched her, not a brush of hands while passing tools, not the accidental contact of fingers around a teacup, was during the raid. It happened at night. Aveline woke to the sound of howling, not wolf howling, but the organized, tactical howling of a pack assault. Someone was attacking Thornwall. She was out of bed and dressed in 45 seconds. She had learned to dress quickly during border emergencies at Ashenmore. muscle memory from years of being the person who managed crises while Garrick managed glory. She grabbed her boots, her cloak, and the heavy iron poker from the fireplace, because she did not have a sword, but she had arms that could lift grain sacks, and a poker was essentially a very angry stick. The courtyard was chaos. Soldiers were scrambling. Lyra was shouting orders with the controlled fury of a commander who had been dragged out of sleep and intended to make someone pay for it. And at the gate, dark shapes were pouring through. Wolves, shifted wolves, at least 20 of them, fast and organized and utterly silent, except for that coordinated howling. "Raiders!" Lyra shouted. "Northern Rogue Pack, form up!" They were not Blackmere wolves. Aveline could tell immediately. These were smaller, rangy, with the desperate look of a pack that had been pushed out of its territory and was attacking border garrisons for supplies. They were not there for conquest. They were there for the storerooms. The storerooms that Aveline had spent 6 weeks rebuilding. "Oh, absolutely not," she said. She ran for the supply building, not to hide, to protect. Those supplies represented 45 trade negotiations, 16 supplier contracts, 11 purchase orders, and one extremely contentious argument about lamp oil. She was not losing them to raiders. She got there ahead of the wolves. She slammed the door shut, braced it with a crossbeam, and positioned herself behind a stack of grain barrels with the iron poker raised, and she waited. 2 raiders hit the door, then 3. The crossbeam held, but the door was old and the wood was groaning. And then Evander was there. He appeared beside her. She did not see him arrive, did not hear him. He was simply suddenly there, as if the shadows had decided to take a specific and extremely competent shape. He had a sword, not a garrison sword, not a standard issue blade, a beautiful, lethal weapon with a silver pommel shaped like a wolf's head, the kind of sword that was made for one person and one person only. "Stay behind me," he said. "I have a poker." "I can see that. Stay behind me anyway." The door broke. 2 wolves came through, huge, snarling, teeth bared. Evander moved. He moved like water, like wind, like something that had been born fighting and had never found a reason to stop. The sword flashed silver in the dark, and the first wolf yelped and scrambled backward, a shallow cut across its shoulder. Not lethal, not cruel, just precise enough to say, "I can kill you, but I am choosing not to." The second wolf lunged, and Evander caught it by the scruff and threw it, threw a full-grown shifted wolf, back through the door with one arm. One arm. Aveline stood there with her poker and thought, very clearly, "Oh." A third wolf came through a window. It landed on a stack of crates behind Aveline, and she did not think, she just swung. The poker connected with the wolf's shoulder, with a crack that she felt in her bones, and the wolf yelped and tumbled off the crates and scrambled for the broken window, and Aveline stood there breathing hard with the poker raised and iron in her blood. Evander looked at her. In the dark, his pale eyes were almost luminous, and there was something in his expression that she had never seen on a man's face before. Not surprise, not admiration, but something deeper, something that looked like recognition. Like he had been looking for something and had just found it. "You hit a shifted wolf with a fireplace poker," he said. "It was on my grain." "Your grain." "I negotiated that grain shipment for 3 days. I'm not losing it to a wolf with poor impulse control." The fight outside was ending. Lyra's soldiers had pushed the raiders back. Aveline could hear the howling fading into the forest. It was over. She was shaking. She always shook after, not during, never during, but after, when the emergency was handled and the adrenaline had nowhere to go. She gripped the poker and breathed and tried to steady herself. Evander sheathed his sword. He stepped close to her, not touching, not yet, just close. Close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Close enough that his presence was a wall between her and the cold dark outside. "You're shaking," he said. "I always shake after. It's fine. It stops." "Can I?" He hesitated. It was the first time she had heard him hesitate about anything. "Can I touch your hand?" She looked at him. In the dark supply room, surrounded by the grain she had negotiated and the cheese she had made, and the evidence of a life she was building with her own hands, she looked at this man who asked permission. "Yes," she said. He took her hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm, steady, careful. He did not squeeze. He did not pull her closer. He simply held her hand, and his thumb pressed against the inside of her wrist where her pulse was hammering, and he held steady until the shaking stopped. It took 3 minutes. She counted. "Thank you," she whispered. "You hit a wolf with a poker," he said. "You don't need to thank me for holding your hand. I'm thanking you for asking first." Something moved in his face, something raw and almost wounded, and she understood he was not used to being thanked for basic decency, which meant that somewhere in his life, basic decency had been rare, and that understanding made her chest hurt in a way she was not prepared for.